Chapter 104. In the first place, Olivia isn't an Ottoman. She is the child of a merchant from one of the 7 extreme northern countries, Rhodes Kingdom. She specially came here to learn alchemy. As an exchange student, she doesn't have much wealth, and her luggage is ridiculously simple. After tossing the potions into her portable space equipment, she brought along her notes and books. After refunding the rent of the shop, she threw the key back to the landlord and turned to leave. By the way, the Donlan Principality is also one of the 7 extreme northern countries. If half of the 7 extreme northern countries' territory is split, it would be the original Mist country. However, this is equivalent to merging 2 countries and taking away a portion of the territory of the other 2 countries. Under the current conditions, it isn't practical. Olivia is rather happy to be able to leave this country under the tutelage of an alchemist. After all, in the eyes of other countries, the people of the extreme northern countries are mostly barbarians who wear fur. Although it is a good thing that there isn't a world of ice and snow for half a year, she has met with quite a few troubles during her studies. After settling the miracle alchemist Olivia, I met with a little trouble when I was looking for the magic engineering teacher Timlad. However, this isn't the first time I met with such trouble. Timlad became famous around 17 to 18 years later. The current Timlad. Alright, when I saw this brat with a runny nose, I wasn't surprised at all. At the very least, I found him in person. This is much better than finding a historical hero's zygote, an ancestor's ancestor. However, I met with a little trouble when I was trying to convince the child's parents. Timlad only has an elder sister whom he depends on. When she returns, I realize that she is actually an old acquaintance. Olivia, Catherine, Teacher Dana, why are you here? This is my home. I was wondering why you are here. Didn't you all drop out of school? What are you all doing here? Do you have any business with me? The calm-looking Madame Dana is in her early 30s. Her face is beautiful, but there is a hint of bitterness in it. She looks dignified with a straight face, but when I look at her flat curves, I recall the story about breasts. Pooh. All right. It is too impolite to laugh in front of her face. Renee, I will complain to Kelly when I get back. You just have to wait for your etiquette lessons. I laughed as well. Well, at least I didn't spit it out. I still had basic manners for a lady. Hello, Teacher Dana. I am Catherine's night teacher. I need a few alchemists to help me, and Catherine recommended you to me. This is a long-term employment, and I'm afraid that you will lose your job in the academy because of this. However, the remuneration will definitely be generous, and there will be opportunities for you to advance. This is Master Alchemist Obr. He is a gold-ranked great alchemist. You can have a chat with him. Since Timlad and his older sister were mutually dependent on each other, it would be impractical to kidnap this little brat by himself. However, as long as I hired this teacher, Timlad would naturally follow me. However, what surprised me was that after hearing what I said, Dana's face lit up, as though she was tempted. However, the next moment, her expression darkened. I'm sorry, I do need a new job, but we're already planning to leave this city. I'm afraid I can't accept your kindness. Go out? Why? She didn't want to tell me at first, but when I asked her, she told me the reason. Actually, the reason is very simple. She felt that this city isn't safe, so she decided to leave. The reason why it isn't safe is because of the humongous creature that can be seen from the window. 9-headed dragon Emperor Hydra. The humongous body occupies half of the river. That raised dragon head can be seen from a few city districts away. That breath of his might not hurt the entire city, but to those unlucky fellows who get hit by it, they would definitely be smashed into smithereens. This isn't the 9-headed dragon emperor who possesses a portion of the dragon's bloodline in the swamp area. The sea monster Hydra that was left behind from the ancient times is a god pet, and it has long obtained a portion of god power. If I were to rank his bloodline, it wouldn't be much inferior to my double diamond bloodline. When such an existence reaches semi-god rank, human semi-gods of the same level are nothing in his eyes. From the very start, this 9-headed dragon emperor is an almost invincible existence in the mortal world. Even the overly powerful Hydra is restricted, so its passive attitude is obvious. However, if you were to take the initiative to provoke it, who else can you blame for seeking death? This is equivalent to the start of a large-scale war game. A few powerful bosses come out to give a lecture, look for old friends to fight, and furiously grind their existences. However, it is just a simple formality of the story mode. As a newbie, you could just watch the movie and get over it. If you think that you can solo the boss and charge forward and shout, "Evil die, I want the Dragon Slayer," who else can you blame if you get killed in an instant? At the very least, after understanding the other party's strength, Desos doesn't intend to fight recklessly. He also doesn't intend to completely anger the owner of the nine-headed dragon, Lady Storm. Looking at his passive way of dealing with the situation and the application letters sent to the various churches, he seems to be waiting for the Order gods to come and solve this problem. Of course, if the nine-headed dragon were to come ashore, just like that, Desos would probably go all out to fight a decisive battle to protect his country. That Hydra obviously knows what he is doing and doesn't intend to escalate the battle, which is why the battle has fallen into a stalemate. On the other hand, the sea folk under his command are putting in more effort. Other than the fact that they have a powerful boss, the main reason for this is because of an accident. In order to put up a front, magic oil lamps were installed along the coastline along the river. What is being burned is the most luxurious item in the human world, the expensive mermaid oil. Mermaids themselves have the reputation of being the beloved of the sea and the royal family of the sea folk. Thus, when the mermaids of the white whale tribe see these oil lamps, it is no different from seeing an ogre cooking human meat pot. They will fight to the death, and the battle escalated. Even though the sea folk are still unable to break through the sturdy protective layer and temporary barrier, the Ottoman Empire has already suffered a lot of losses. The appearance of the nine-headed dragon caused the docks to sink into the river. A portion of the citizens managed to escape in time, but a portion of the unlucky ones fell into the river along with their houses, unable to get up again. My uncle's family lives in the docks. My boyfriend's house was hit by the dragon breath, and his entire family was obliterated. We intend to leave this sad city. Recently, there are quite a number of people who left the city because of this, and Lady Dana is one of them. However, her luck isn't too good. They have only been dating for 2 weeks, and her new boyfriend met with an inexplicable calamity. Most of the wars on the continent are like this. No matter who wins or loses, no matter how righteous the reason for the war is, the ones who suffer first are the powerless citizens. That's great. Oh, I didn't mean to say that the matter regarding your family is great. My apologies, lady, I misspoke. What I meant was that this job requires you to go overseas. Since you intend to leave this city, it might be suitable for you. Is that so? I would like to hear the details. All right, since the other party also intends to leave this city, this employment contract with generous remuneration easily moves Dana, who is still worrying about her future. When the two rising stars of the future are in my hands, I can't help but feel doubtful. Since I have interfered with their fates, will they still be as important as before? Will they still be able to grow to their original heights? But thinking about it from another perspective, even if I didn't interfere, the fate of the two of them would have already changed. Since the ambush of the sea folk caused Tim Ladd to leave just like that, regardless of whether he becomes a master engineer in the future, there is no longer any basis for the two of them to work together in the future. Perhaps it is already impossible for magical engineering to appear. Well, what's the point of thinking so much? At the very least, the two of them are good seedlings. Then, I should just maintain my normal state of mind and groom them as a talented newcomer. Since I have introduced Olivia to Ingo, I should introduce little Tim Ladd to Gold Tooth. If the magical machinery dragon is born in the future, it should be more in the style of Goblin Explosion. In the ancient legends of the northern lands, on the days when the mountains are sealed by heavy snow, the coldest few days of the year, in the depths of the snowy mountains where no one is able to reach, would be the day when the demons and monsters of the snowy mountains would come out for a feast. At that time, there would be snowy mountain spirits, snow monsters, snow women, snowmen, and so on. Myths and legends usually have an original form, and the original form of this legend is the frigid nightmare. Nightmare is a nightmare, an unknown demon in a nightmare. The frigid nightmare, in reality, is the collective name for the nameless demons that come from the snowy mountains. They are formless demons, but they are also existences with form. They are just like the aurora unique to the northern lands, ever-changing and colorful. However, when you get close to them, you won't be able to see anything at all. Their legend has been passed down for thousands of years. The people of the northern lands would tell their children to never head to the snowy mountains on a snowy day, until a person who didn't believe it insisted on meeting the nightmares of the snowy mountains on a snowy day. He is the ancestor of the Mist royal family. No one knows what happened in the depths of the snowy mountains, but ever since then, the aurora night that caught the attention of the entire continent appeared in the snow country. The night class has always been the main fighting force of the human race. This is because the various kinds of mounts can allow the weak humans to swiftly grow stronger. A rookie riding a griffin is also a Tier 3 soldier, but even the weakest Aurora Knight is a Tier 4 soldier. This is enough to prove the strength of the Frigid Nightmare. The Frigid Nightmare is a spiritual being, so its form isn't fixed. It is precisely because of its ever-changing form that it possesses an extremely strong adaptability and growth potential. The Frigid Nightmare will grow together with the young knight whom they share a mind with. They will draw nourishment from the soul of the knight. Thus, the contracted beast of every Aurora Knight is different. However, most of the nightmares will choose the form of the snowy mountains demons, such as snowman, snow leopard, etc. Of course, the one that people are most envious of is still the Snow Lady, even though her fighting strength is rather weak. Alright, there is no need to explain the reason. All men understand. However, in order to facilitate group battles, the three forms of Ice Unicorn, Eagle of Storm, and Armored Arctic Bear are compulsory for every nightmare. The Aurora Knight that is in charge of a group is able to switch between a flying assault, an accelerated assault, and a heavy armored charge within a short few minutes, making it an unmistakable tyrant of the snow. As a top-tier magical creature, Frigid Maw's intelligence is extremely high. The infant Frigid Maw already has the intelligence of a 3 to 4-year-old child, and the adult Frigid Maw is even smarter than a human. Many of the Aurora Knight, who is in the form of a Snow Lady, never married, probably because they fell in love with their contracted magical beast. Due to the existence of the bloodline contract, it is easy for the Mist royal family to gain the recognition of Frigid Maw. In the past, the members of the Mist royal family would basically have the identity of an Aurora Knight, and their reputation among the commoners is extremely high. In my generation, there is no doubt that Cavendish is an Aurora Knight. His nightmare is able to freely switch between an ice dragon and an ice behemoth, and it is even in the enviable form of a Snow Lady. Not only is it powerful, it is also pleasing to the eyes. It really makes one envious. Alright, speaking up to this point, everyone should have already guessed it. The reason why I keep emphasizing on the enviable Snow Lady is because I don't have one. In fact, I am not even an Aurora Knight. Silver rank is the lowest starting point for this kind of arrogant ice magical creature to acknowledge me. Back then, I was just a bronze rank rookie. By the time I reached the standard of combat strength, we were already in a long war, and it was unrealistic for me to casually change my power form. Thus, I could only look at the envious, jealous, and hateful sisters beside the knight. In my second and third life, the Aurora Knight is already extinct in the continent, and the sudden appearance of one is equivalent to exposing my identity. I am not so foolish as to seek my own death. Now, my power system has already taken shape, and I already have a mental plan for how to develop it in the future. My power system is already complicated enough. Adding another Aurora Knight to it would bring more harm than good. Thus, I can only look at the envious, jealous, and hateful Snow Lady sisters. Yes, Snow Lady sisters. In this period of time, there are only 2 people who have been acknowledged by Frigid Maw. One of them is a male knight named Eloin. His nightmare form is a snowman, or perhaps it should be called a snow gorilla. Even though it is shockingly ugly, it is agile and possesses immense strength, making it an extremely useful nightmare for chaotic battles. The reason why he was acknowledged, other than the fact that his nightmare was once the companion of my ancestor, It is also because he is one of the only 2 gold-rank knight of the royal knight family. If we were to directly use the nightmare left behind by our ancestor, the advantage is that we would be able to save on the long period of nurturing it. However, the disadvantage is that there would be many problems in the coordination between the knight and the nightmare. It wouldn't be as smooth and easy as if we were to nurture them since they were young. The other newly born Aurora Knight is Renee, who was forcefully pulled up by me using my golden finger. The moment she became a silver rank, those arrogant nightmares who refused to acknowledge anyone took the initiative to contract with her. In the end, she ignored the strongly recommended heavy ice, wild boar, and snow giant, choosing a snow lady called Seva. But in reality, these heavy monsters are the fastest way to raise her weak battle prowess and worrisome survivability. They're all so ugly. Sister Seva is so beautiful and mature, I would definitely choose her. All right, should I say, as expected of a princess? The moment those words came out, the huge and burly nightmares were all heartbroken. But at this moment, I approve of this choice. Because even though the Snow Lady form is weak in close combat, her power of ice and snow is one of the strongest. Creating ice armor and ice weapons is the fastest, and at this moment, what we need the most is this ability. With the help of the Siren Tracy, our group walked directly from the bottom of the river. Even if we were to bump into a Fishman Patrol team, as a high-tier sea folk, she could easily order those low-tier fishmen to retreat. However, if we were to wear armor and carry heavy weapons, even a mermaid would be unable to float. In order to make it easier for us to move underwater, we chose to travel light. When we reached the underwater base, the gigantic snowman could only give his knight a layer of equipment before preparing for battle. On the other hand, Seva prepared an ice weapon for everyone. Ice magic sword attack power 10 to 12. If the user is an Aurora Knight, the attack power will be doubled and the quality of the weapon will be raised by 1 rank. The weapon quality is currently Superior Frostblade. The blade of the sword deals additional 5 ice damage. Inextinguishable ice. The freezing magic of the frigid nightmare causes the hardness of the ice sword to far surpass that of steel. You can use it to clash with adamantine weapons without worry. Bone-piercing chill. Those who touch the magic sword with their skin will receive 1 point of ice damage per second. If the user is wearing the Winter Wolf gloves blessed by Frigid Maw, they will be immune to this damage for half an hour. The Aurora Knight will be immune to this damage. When everyone had a suitable weapon, Shiva, who was panting heavily, began to forge the armor for me. It is the super heavy armor of the Mist Country's unique job, the Avalanche Defender. After putting on this heavy armor, I lightly knock on the huge door-sized shield attached to the armor. I have completely turned into a heavy fortress, becoming the meat shield that we are currently lacking the most. As for the ice armor's additional frost damage, my Titan body had long since ignored this pitiful 1 damage per second. The alarm reverberates throughout the base. Even the slow-witted undead notice our preparations. Looking at the approaching undead knight, zombies and skeletons, I caress my pale justice lightly and ignite the holy flame on the tip of my sword. Undead who should have long returned to their graves, let me use the holy flame to grant you eternal rest and purification. After saying this standard Holy Night declaration to the undead, I felt inexplicably displeased and muttered to myself, "Why does it sound so awkward to say? Forget it. Let's just use that charging battle roar. Holy light, that evil is worth fighting." Chapter 105. Give me 10 seconds. With a low roar, I unsheathed both of my swords at the same time. Facing the incoming wave of undead, I unhesitatingly charged at the very front. So fast. Killing was an art, and art required the devotion of the body, mind, flesh, and even the soul. On the battlefield, there was no need to think too much. Give up everything and let the instincts of the body rule over everything. The exclamations behind me were no longer important as I fully focused on swinging my swords. As a close combat job, swordsmanship would forever be the foundation of everything, and I was, without a doubt, a master swordsman. In Aichi, where cold weapons were the king, Swordsmanship was a skill that brought death. Thousands of years of development and inheritance had given every country and region their own swordsmanship schools. Pure warriors might not have the Holy Knight's gorgeous holy light, nor the Arcane Knight's profound magic, but they would always stand at the peak of close combat jobs. What they relied on was the sword in their hands and their well-tempered physical bodies. The sword was the king of all weapons. Among warriors, there would always be the most sword users. However, even though everyone could train in swordsmanship, those who could reach a high level were few and far between. If someone's swordsmanship reached a level that mortals couldn't reach, they would receive the title of Sword Saint. This had nothing to do with a person's identity, job, or power level. The only thing that mattered was their swordsmanship. Sword Saint, the saint of the sword, a swordsman who transcended the mortal world. I was a sword saint. Furthermore, I was a wild sword saint without any inheritance and self-taught on the battlefield. Due to my unorthodox background, my swordsmanship wasn't as mystical and varied as the mainstream swordsmanship in this world. I didn't have the noble inheritance of Casolin's soaring eagle sword, so naturally, I couldn't soar and pounce like the soaring sword. I didn't have the unpredictability of Solo's illusory dragon sword, and I couldn't create phantom clones that could create 9 shadows with one sword. As for Allen's collapsing dragon sword's aura and the endless shockwave of the sword's aura, it really makes me envious. As a holy knight of the Holy Church, I didn't even learn the elegance and beauty of my own mist sword. Compared to the mystical swords that have been passed down in various countries for thousands of years, which only rely on swordsmanship to achieve magical effects, my sword is just a pure art of slaughter. It is the summary of my experiences on the battlefield, simple to the point of being ugly. Even though I was born unorthodox as well, even before I received the inheritance of the Phoenix, Adam's swordsmanship had the elegant and majestic aura of a grandmaster. After receiving the inheritance, his power increased tremendously. His sword was like the soaring of a phoenix, filling the sky with afterimages of his sword. Every time he swung his sword, there would be the cries of a phoenix and the faint image of a phoenix. It was extravagant to the extreme. When he fought with all his might, it could be seen from several kilometers away. In fact, he even had the reputation of Red Lotus Sword. Phoenix clouds fill the sky. As half of his swordsmanship tutor, my swordsmanship was still the simplest basic swordsmanship. What was impressive was that it was just that little bit faster, that little bit more accurate, and that little bit more vicious. Just based on appearance, I couldn't even be considered a grandmaster swordsman, much less a sword saint. If it wasn't for the fact that I had defeated a few sword saints with my swordsmanship, even I wouldn't believe that I had become a sword saint. I started off learning basic swordsmanship. After so many years, I had learned countless famous swordsmanship and grasped many profound meanings. However, the swordsmanship that I was most proficient in and most commonly used was still the ugly and simple basic swordsmanship. Basic swordsmanship, as the name suggested, was a basic battlefield swordsmanship that every swordsman, Holy Knight, and Black Knight would learn. Stabbing, hacking, pointing, and sweeping were the basics. Speed, accuracy, and viciousness were the essentials. Strength, eyesight, and agility were the basics. Everyone knew and understood it. If someone said that they could become a sword saint just by using this swordsmanship, they would probably laugh their heads off. The Red Lotus Sword Saint Adam is a world-renowned great sword saint, and is even regarded as the pinnacle of human swordsmanship. However, Adam, this brat, has never been able to win against me in a contest of swordsmanship. The reason? To be honest, I didn't know either. It was probably because I really liked playing with swords. Just by relying on swordsmanship that everyone could learn, I was still the most famous sword saint of my generation. The holy sword in my left hand glowed with a dazzling rainbow light, while the ice magic sword in my right hand glowed with the brilliance of an aurora. The beautiful sword light was like a butterfly spreading its wings. The colorful wings suddenly spread out to form a 3-meter wide rainbow light. Then I swung it down, causing the entire ground to tremble. At the same time, I had already turned into a destructive hurricane. With the help of the two swords that had their own attributes and the holy light, My ordinary swordsmanship had a little more color to it. The ice magic sword in my left hand, which was intentionally thickened, was edgeless. However, the thick body of the sword made it convenient for me to play with all sorts of tricks. Zombies had boundless strength, thick skin, and didn't fear pain. I slashed off the head with a slash and sliced off the bone marrow. The fulcrum of the body was destroyed, and Sleepless Corpse was completely reduced to a pile of flesh. The General Skeleton, was like steel, and it didn't fear piercing or sharp weapons. With a sweep of my sword, the huge door-sized sword turned into a huge club. In an instant, the skeleton's body would fall apart, or even be beaten to the ground. Undead Knight, I heard that you're highly skilled in martial arts, and that you also know some dark and undead magic. Hey, what do you mean by falling with a single slash? Why are you so fragile? Little Lionheart was already thousands of times stronger than you when he was just revived. Banshee, I heard that you don't fear physical damage, and that you are skilled in all sorts of weakening spells and curses. You are basically a close combat killer? Curses are a big problem. Eat my profound 7 bitterness sword. Hey, why are you running? Can't you have some dignity as a high-level undead? You are throwing the face of a banshee. Look at the banshee queen on your shoulder. She can't even bear to look at you. Knock, tap, smash, slash. Heavy hammer, rapier, club, two-handed blade. Even though it was a heavy and clumsy sword, I was able to use it in countless ways. My accumulated swordsmanship foundation allowed me to casually turn the huge sword into a sure-kill sword that targeted the opponent's weakness. Since the start of the battle, at least one opponent would fall with every slash, and my armor hadn't even taken a single hit. This was just the ice sword in my right hand. The sacred sword in my left hand was even simpler. After I infused sufficient holy light into the sacred sword, Judgment of Justice began to announce the end of the undead. Judgment of Justice. Activate the power of judgment bestowed by the soul gem. After the sacred sword strikes a chaos being, it will be judged. If the other party doesn't pass the judgment, they will be completely destroyed. Duration, 10 minutes. Number of uses per day, 3 as long as they were to be struck. Even if it was just a slight graze from the wind of the sword, the weak undead would be reduced to dust. After realizing that this special effect was very effective against undead, and that the undead's counterattack was laughably weak, the sword in my left hand, which was originally mainly used for defense, started to be used for offense as well. The efficiency of my killing instantly doubled. My heavy ice armor was roughly the weight of a thick chainmail. My seemingly ordinary physical body actually possessed the strength of 1,000 kilograms. Even though I was wearing a thick armor, I was still able to dance around the battlefield like a paladin. But in reality, it was all for naught. Needless to say, I wasn't even able to receive a single blow from the enemy, not to mention getting injured by my defense. I finally realized that I had accidentally made a mistake. Comparing the strength of those fellows in Sulphur Mountain City to the newly born undead in front of me was like comparing a kindergarten kid to a super soldier who had been through hundreds of battles. Both of them were humans, but the difference between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. If I were to use the strength of a special forces soldier to deal with a kid, I reckon that it would be a one-sided massacre. Just as I was killing excitedly, the area in front of me suddenly cleared up. There were no longer any enemies around me. Thus, making use of this opportunity, I gripped the sword with my left hand in a reverse grip and my right hand in a straight grip. Slow, foolish. Do you think that you can compete with me like this? Dream on. After a furious roar, both of my swords burst forth at the same time. Sword lights swirled around me, and my entire body started to spin, turning into a tornado of death. As the two swords spun, the whirlpool filled with sword energy started to overflow, following which the excess and rampaging sword energy started to spread, and the rapidly spinning blades drove the sword energy to spin. Finally, my entire body turned into a formless and fatal sword energy storm. Ding! Congratulations for comprehending the legend rank common swordsmanship secret, Blade Storm. Using this skill, you will turn into a high-speed spinning storm of swords. The rapidly spinning blades and sword energy will deal heavy damage to all enemy ground troops in the vicinity. Under the influence of Blade Storm, you won't feel pity, regret, or fear. Other than death, there is nothing that can stop you. Prerequisites: 20 strength, 10 agility, 15 stamina. Those who have motion sickness, boat sickness, and low agility should use it with caution. I won't tell you that the invincible great sword Saint Hodal was killed by a group of kobolds while vomiting because he got too dizzy from spinning. Although I said that I comprehended it, in reality, it is just a memory. Swordsmanship can be used as long as the basic stats are up to standard. I have already comprehended countless swordsmanship along the way. There's a reason why Blade Storm is the Sword Saint's favorite secret. It has a wide attack range, allowing the swordsman to kill a large number of enemies in one go. It is the best method to deal with encirclement. Of course, its weakness is that it can't be stopped after using it. Furthermore, the trajectory of the movements will become very obvious. If I meet a strong opponent, this drilling top can easily become a target. At this moment, the undead that come into contact with a Blade Storm are basically being attacked by two swords at the same time. It is already very strong to be able to last for 2 seconds. As I move, not a single undead can escape. The Blade Storm starts to devour everything. When I finally stop, the area in front of me is already wide open. There are only hundreds of undead corpses on the ground. Ha ha ha! I am already invincible. Damn, where did this thing come from? Looking at the new opponent, I, who was just getting carried away, turns around and runs without hesitation. The reason? The newly arrived undead army has dragged over high-level siege cannons. Not to mention, the floating battleships in the distance are slowly starting to move, and the heavy magic cannons are already starting to aim. As long as I am hit by one of the cannons, I will definitely be smashed into smithereens. I can reincarnate once again. The rewards are really not bad. In just a short while, this great experience gift pack has allowed me to level up once again. Just now, the system seems to have notified me that I have received some spoils of war. However, now is obviously not the time to organize the rewards. Just as I return to my teammates, I realize that everyone is looking at me as if I am a monster. After all, I only said that I would charge out to attract the enemy's firepower for 10 seconds. However, in the end, not only did I go out for a few minutes, I even single-handedly cleared out the undead on the pier. I'm sorry, they are really too weak. It was too easy for me to kill them, so I didn't leave any for you. Why are you all looking at me like that? Oh, didn't I say that I am a sword saint? All right, they are shaking their heads in unison. Only Kelly, who already knew about it, smiles and nods her head slightly. On the other hand, Renee has a look of shock, regret, and happiness on her face. As expected, his usual sloppy and unreliable personality isn't the truth. The true Holy Knight Roland is still terrifyingly strong. I'm still far from his level. Originally, she was delighted that she was able to become an Aurora Knight. She was even more delighted that she seems to possess the strength to suppress the current bronze rank teacher. However, from the looks of it now, even though she doesn't know why he has fallen into a state of decline, the legendary Holy Knight Roland is still a legend. Just his swordsmanship alone is enough for him to dominate the world. A bronze rank Holy Knight Sword Saint. This is too inconceivable. The other new knight retainer, Catherine, is also stunned. She was originally dissatisfied with her teacher's strength, but from the looks of it now, not only is he more than capable of teaching her, he is even capable of teaching her father. After all, swordsmanship requires a large amount of practice, basic abilities, and the accumulation of practical experience. A holy knight spends most of his time focusing on holy light and divine arts. For a sword saint to emerge from a third-rate holy knight is already inconceivable. Not to mention, the fact that a low-rank holy knight has become a sword saint goes against all common sense. As long as your talent in magic is half of your talent in swordsmanship, you won't become the shame of all mages, the mage heavy cannon tower. On the other hand, the black cat on my shoulder, as usual, is unable to utter anything decent. As usual, I ignore it. However, this wasn't the time for idle chatter. The mage towers that served as the base's defense began to flash, and on the tallest mage tower, a pitch-black figure stood up. That familiar skeleton that was overflowing with death magic made me sigh in admiration. It's actually another one that's running around naked. Are liches allowed to be naked? How uncivilized, how indecent. The undead's culture is just as corrupted. If this was Sulphur Mountain City, you would have long been beaten up by the town's security. What's even more dangerous is the airship that is floating in midair. The pitch-black magic-heavy cannons that are docked at the port have already begun to charge. As for me, I am completely unmoved. Asterisk pack. Asterisk with a snap of my fingers, two heavy cannons open fire at the same time. However, asterisk boom. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the airship's target isn't us. Two of the mage towers in the base are shot at the same time. One of them even has a hole in the middle and starts to collapse. I've never seen such a lousy cannoneer. Stupid shorty over there. Raise the angle by 10 degrees and tilt left by 30 degrees. The loud voice of the ace hunter, Lowen's, could be heard in midair. From his proud commanding, it seemed like he was the one who shot the cannon that destroyed the tower just now. Idiot, I was aiming at the Lich just now. Then you missed even more. You hit the wrong mage tower. Raise the angle by 40 degrees and tilt right by 30 degrees. At the same time, Diana and Kolos appear on two separate airships. Look, we attracted the enemy's attention and allowed the two strongest mages to sneak onto the airship with the shorties who specialize in cannons. Our plan to take over the two airships at the port and use them as our fighting force has been a great success. Huh, I told you that we're already invincible. Ugh, looks like I really can't say that. A few warehouses in the base are opened and 4 identical airships start to float up. It seems like our plan isn't complete enough. After all, airships aren't ships. Since they can fly, they can easily hide in the base. Those above focus on dealing with the airships. Leave the Lich to us. Allowing the mages to do as they please is equivalent to courting death. Looking at the Lich who is being protected by a group of undead knights, the Yeti Knight who acts as a meat shield has already charged to the very front. The knight fearlessly starts to charge, so how could I possibly fall behind? Chapter 106. Know yourself, know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Although this isn't a new maxim, it is a principle that I have always believed in war. If you don't even know how much strength the enemy has, then you shouldn't have fought in the first place. In a temple, the one who calculates more wins, the one who calculates less wins, not to mention the one who calculates nothing. The outcome of a negotiation is usually decided by the situation of the two parties before the negotiation. I also believe that the outcome of a war will be decided before the start of the war. A war without benefits and no chance of victory is undesirable. Due to the sudden appearance of a 9-headed dragon emperor, the Ottoman Empire and the Sea Folk are in a stalemate. However, a stalemate is always short-lived. I expect that the situation will change very soon. No matter which side gains the upper hand, it won't be a good thing for me and Dongwon. If the Ottoman Empire wins, Dasos' position will be stabilized. Based on his personality, he will most likely cause some trouble. If the Seafolk Empire wins, I'm afraid that this city will no longer belong to humans. Just like the legendary underwater city of Yasuo, it is not impossible for it to completely sink into the water. Thus, I make use of this stalemate to conquer this underwater base and use it as a base to obtain the airship technology and samples. This way, I will be able to reap some benefits. If the situation turns bad, I will be able to escape. The contract can be completed at any moment. There isn't much time left. There is only one chance. If the first attack fails, then it will be troublesome the next time. With the help of the Queen of Banshees, it isn't difficult for a few low-tier undead to sneak in. I have already done enough scouting and preparations beforehand. The structure of this base isn't complicated. The dock area is where the airships are being constructed, the mage area is where the mages and craftsmen live, and the 6 mage towers are the most dangerous defensive structures here. There is a squadron of White Wolf Guard stationed here. There are around 300 of them. The only ones who can fight are the mages. Based on the usual 10:1 conversion rate, there are around 30 undead who are qualified to become Undead Knight. As for the banshees, liches, and other high-level undead who possess silver rank and intelligence upon awakening, the conversion rate is even lower. I don't think it will exceed the number of Undead Knight. In other words, there shouldn't be more than 100 high-level undead. However, judging from the current situation, there were more than 100 Death Knight squad members, so there was only one possibility for such a high conversion rate. Should that Prince Callison have been secretly practicing necromancy, since he was a human? A prince of a kingdom is actually a necromancer above the saint level. Looks like he's plotting something big. Very quickly, the scouts discovered a few hundred-man pits. It seemed that after realizing that they were isolated, they had started a massacre in order to reduce the consumption of food. Then, seeing that the situation was not right and that they would not be able to connect to the outside world in a short period of time, Callison decided to reveal his identity as a necromancer. He turned himself into a lich and his subordinates into undead. He even had the help of undead workers who did not sleep at all, allowing the construction to proceed ahead of schedule. In fact, during the scouts' investigation, they had already discovered the soul-summoning tower and the undead converter that could convert the living into undead. However, they weren't sure if they were built secretly or after the isolation. This evil device that could convert the living into brainless low-level undead amidst endless pain was definitely the most evil of all evil. The soul-summoning tower was a taboo even in Shiloh. After all, although this device could convert undead on a large scale, no matter what went into it, it would only turn out to be cannon fodder like skeletons and zombies. Not only that, these mass-produced undead were naturally lacking, making it difficult for them to grow and evolve, not to mention awakening into intelligent high-level undead. Shiloh wasn't completely devoid of living residents, although most of them were slaves or vassals. Not to mention, there were dozens of undead masters who could satisfy all kinds of conversion requirements. This highly effective but low-quality conversion method was only suitable for massacring entire cities in times of war to convert cannon fodder. The several hundred-man pits that were equivalent to a massacre had already touched the bottom line of the divine arts. A massacre in this infamous soul-summoning tower, Prince Callison's actions could no longer be described as excessive. This also gave a law job class a reason to crusade against Callison. Otherwise, I would have to think of another way to fill in the loopholes that Kolos and the others had left behind. Right now, the enemy's main fighting force was probably the brainless skeletons and zombies that the blacksmiths and their family members had converted into. Judging from the sheer number of them, the soul-summoning tower, which was viewed as a taboo, was indeed very powerful. Callison had indeed done it without any limits to make the best use of everything. My intelligence work was already quite good, but it was impossible to take every possibility into account on the battlefield. What was unexpected was that the enemy's progress was far too fast. There were already 4 light assault airships that had entered the storage. Asterisk boom. Asterisk asterisk boom. Asterisk asterisk cannons boomed in midair, thick smoke billowed, and metal shards and wooden planks fell from the sky. The cannons between airships of the same type were even more brutal and intense. Vulture, Type 1 assault airship. Its original form was a small gunship used for surface warfare, and it was also the prototype of the floating airship fleet. It had a magically charged main cannon, 2 engineering cannons, and 2 harpoon cannons. These were all excellent weapons originally used for surface warfare. It was designed to carry 30 people, but it could even carry 5 or 6 people. The current floating airships were still at the stage of imitating surface ships. It was far from the domineering might of the Cloud Army that would soar into the sky 10 years later. In fact, in my eyes, even 2 legend-ranked mages would be able to take it down. Even though it wasn't too strong, it was still an extremely important prototype airship. The floating turbine system on it, as well as the ship's aerial control system, were the most classic initial models. At the same time, the word initial also meant that its structure was simple, making it easy to analyze and imitate. Thus, even if the Ottoman Empire started to sell some low-tier floating airships in the future, this original Vulture would never be sold. Due to the appearance of the ambush, we were now facing a bitter battle of 2 against 4. Originally, we who had lost in terms of the number of ships would definitely be at a disadvantage in terms of manpower. However, with the addition of the goblin engineers that Ingo brought, compared to the slow-witted newborn undead, our crew members are much more capable. On the other hand, the ace hunter lamans who had been playing with guns for more than 200 years displayed astonishing skills in operating a cannon that was extremely similar to it. Not only was he able to hit the target with his main cannon, he even had the spare time to calculate the angle of the other ship's main cannon. Amidst his curses, he gave orders to the other warship. On the other hand, even though the number of warships on the other side had doubled, their crew members weren't able to bring out the full potential of the warship. The newborn undead were still very weak. Kalishin's undead army lacked a solid foundation, and the intelligent undead in his hands were extremely limited. Even if they were to be controlled by his necromancy, there would probably be quite a number of them who harbored hatred in their hearts. After all, to most of the ordinary humans who believe in the gods of order, they would rather die and enter the divine realm than become bloodthirsty undead that was viewed as an enemy by the world. There weren't many trustworthy people that he could use. Low-tier skeletons could be used as laborers, but it was too much for them to be used as crew members that required skills. On the other side's warship, there was only 1 or 2 necromancers and 2 middle-tier undead who could barely speak. Then, they used a bunch of skeletons and zombies as sailors. The necromancer, who was the captain, was most likely a mage in the past. As he fought, he forgot to fire his cannon. Or perhaps, when he realized that he couldn't hit the target no matter how hard he tried, he jumped onto the deck and started casting his spells. However, the fact that the other party was a mage and was attacking independently reminded Kolos. Thus, the sky was filled with thunderstorms, and the cannons and thunder roared at the same time. As a legendary tier great druid, the interference of crows causes the balance of the aerial battle to tip over completely. Lightning strikes furiously, and the other party's airship is struck by lightning repeatedly. Even the sails of the airship are set ablaze, and smoke is rising from the deck. In the Elven Kingdom, the Storm Droll was a turret job that was comparable to a fire mage. When he went all out, it was as if he had multiple main cannons. Not only would his firepower be doubled, the accuracy of a mage's spells would be far superior to a heavy cannon, which required a large amount of calculations. In just a short period of time, Kolos and Lamans' warship was actually suppressing the other 4 warships on the other side. Both sides continuously fired their cannons. Thunderstorms and death spells were fired back and forth. The flames and explosions of the main cannons tore through the sky, and the smoke of the heavy cannon began to fill the air. Asterisk crash. Asterisk finally. The first casualty appeared. Heavy cannons and thunderstorms simultaneously struck the Vulture warship with a number 3 on its deck. It was the first warship to break apart. Its body split open from the middle, and the rear half of the warship exploded into sparks. The front half of the warship began to fall. When the third warship exploded in midair, the situation became 2 against 3. The light of victory appeared on our side. However, it was a pity that we rejoiced too early. The other side's magic support and the Lich weren't just for show. Suddenly, the Lich Kalishin's mage tower also exploded with an intense red light. A gigantic flame blast with a crimson glow shot out. The fireball, which was filled with fire magic, was huge and fast. It was impossible to block it. Asterisk boom. Asterisk even though Kolos' thunderstorm attempted to block it, the gigantic fireball still struck the first warship that Diana was on. Fire magic was extremely powerful. Even the strategic level flame blast that Kalishin cast through the mage tower's amplification was not something that Kolos' thunderstorm could compare to. The next moment, the same misfortune as the third warship happened to its sister warship. The first warship's silence was even more direct than its sister's, and it immediately began to break apart in the explosion. Jump off the ship. The gnome engineers unhesitatingly began to jump off the ship. Their good habit of always being prepared for explosions and preparing an escape route saved them. After giving the order to abandon the ship, numerous white parachutes appeared in the air. These were the gnome parachutes that were hung on the side of the ship. But unfortunately, as a melee holy knight who had been wearing heavy armor for a long time, Diana was basically useless in aerial combat. Ever since she successfully took over the warship, she became nothing more than a decoration. However, she was overjoyed to find the Ottoman specialties, the micellar mithril alloy full body armor, in the Vulture assault airship. This was a rare item that definitely couldn't be found on the market. Thinking about how she was currently in battle, she unhesitatingly put it on. All right, we could understand the desire of a melee knight who had been acting as a meat shield for a long time to have good armor. However, a simple and crude parachute would definitely be unable to carry a fully armored, heavily armored holy knight. The screaming legend-ranked holy knight used her own example to explain that even a holy knight needed to add a point of intelligence. Even if it would be useless in battle, dying from stupidity would be far too unsightly. As previously mentioned, although the micellar mithril alloy contained elements of mithril, most of it was an alloy of rare and precious metals. Although its defense and mana capacity were excellent, it was far too heavy. Not even the Ottoman warhorses that were fully equipped with heavy armor would be able to carry it. This forcefully turned the White Wolf Guards into light cavalry. The heavily armored infantry's full-body armor had even better defense, but it was also naturally ridiculously heavy. If a can of apple was thrown down from a height of more than 100 meters, regardless of whether the can would shatter into pieces or not, the apple would definitely turn into fruit jam. And if Diana really fell down, no matter if she was a legend-ranked knight or something else, she would instantly turn into elf jam amidst the shards of armor. With her legend-ranked strength, if she didn't wear this full-body armor, she could still think of a way to survive. But now, the full-body armor was just like a metal cage. No matter how regretful she was, there was nothing she could do. Moon Knight Diana died in AD 1897. Cause of death: stealing and being too stupid. Big foolish lass, why are you so stupid? She could already imagine what those fellows with bad habits would write on their goals. Save me. It's too embarrassing to die like this. I haven't completed my life's goal yet. My savings are hidden in my boots. Please help me pass them to Victoria. And, Lord Patricia, please guide me on the path. I repent my sins to the holy light. Lord Womians, I haven't seen your great achievements yet. I haven't dated anyone before, but don't want to die. Lord Womians, save me. All right, I had already started to close my eyes to pray. But suddenly, my body felt light and the speed of my descent slowed down. Then, it seemed to have stopped. Fool, you still remember to call for me to save you. At least you aren't completely hopeless. When she opened her eyes, she saw that a familiar person was pulling her. Golden wings were spread out, and the fiery halo on his head was burning fiercely. That legendary posture made Diana think of a certain legend. Angel, am I already dead? Lord, why are you here as well? Are you dead as well? Are you actually an angel? The legend-ranked knight, who was scared to death, had a panicked expression on her face. The moment she opened her mouth, she completely exposed her adorable nature beneath her mature exterior. In the legends, angels are indeed the ones who receive the souls of the dead. But when she opened her mouth, why did I feel so awkward? I take back what I said just now. As expected, you are hopeless. What do you mean by you are here as well? I have never been able to go to heaven in my life. With a flap of my wings, I flew in an arc, dodging the storm arrows and fireballs shot at me from the mage tower in the distance. When we get back, I will have a good talk with you about that ridiculous confession before death. If the three true gods really heard it, with a believer like you, they might even be amused by you. But for now, let's work together to deal with some serious matters. While gliding, I looked down and saw that the battle below had already turned into a mess. The battle on the ground was much crueler than in the air. The other party's advantage in numbers was much more obvious. Other than the boundless and brainless cannon fodder, The other party's main force was obviously the Death Knight that was transformed from the White Wolf Guard. Most of the revived White Wolf Guard were still in a state of confusion after just awakening. They had not regained enough intelligence and were unable to use dark magic and their natural talents. It would be a stretch to call them Death Knight, but they were more like slightly stronger zombie warriors. Even so, they were still difficult to deal with. There was no other reason. As the Imperial Guards of the Ottoman Empire, the equipment of the White Wolf Guard was just too good. The Mistler critical sword carried a crimson brilliance. The ripple-shaped blade seemed to be howling constantly. The exquisite swords of the Donlon Royal Knight were unable to withstand a single blow from it. Furthermore, the Mistler explosive javelins were weapons of mass destruction. Every time they were thrown, a huge crater would be blasted open. If one was not careful, they might die in their hands. What was fortunate was that their intelligence wasn't high at the moment. In the chaotic battle, there were many accidental injuries. When the javelins were thrown out, the ones who were blasted away were basically their own cannon fodder. This infuriated the Death Knight and the Lich. Due to Prince Kalishin's identity as a necromancer, the Death Knight was several times more than expected. When I flew into the air, there was only the Snowman Knight, a powerful meat shield on the ground. Coupled with the support of the Mage Tower's magic, the battle below fell into a stalemate. It was fortunate that Beifong and Cassio were around. Against the threatening explosive javelins, their arrows were able to easily detonate them in advance, preventing us from suffering heavy losses. Even though the battle on the ground was getting more and more difficult, I didn't have any intentions of interfering. After all, I had to take the initiative in a battle. I didn't have much time to transform, so I had to maximize my mobility. As for the battle on the ground, looking at the time, it was about time. Rumble, rumble. As expected, very quickly, an explosion not too far away attracted the attention of everyone. The hidden chess pieces that I had arranged were indeed effective. As expected, it would be a waste to leave Grimm and Ingo on the battlefield. It would be more suitable for them to wreak havoc behind the enemy's back. Yes, since we have the other party's intelligence, it would be foolish for us to fight them head-on. We are lacking in numbers, but we have plenty of experts, making it suitable for small-scale battles. From the very start, I had split my manpower into several small teams. Kolos and Diana were the first and second team to seize the ships. The explosive maniac Grimm and Ingo were the first team to destroy the explosions at the enemy's back. Following the explosion, the arcane radiance of several mage towers began to extinguish. Then, due to the poor connection between the two towers, they flickered in and out of existence. Finally, they completely dimmed. It was evident that Clint and the others had completed the target of my explosion. The energy pool of this base had been successfully destroyed, and the mage towers that had lost their energy supply were beginning to collapse. Before the backup energy source and the small-scale energy source within the mage towers are activated, let's complete our primary objective. The primary objective of this battle? It's to suppress Kalishin himself. Fighting a war of attrition against the undead army is the most foolish choice. The boundless and never-ending sea of undead has no concept of fatigue or morale. They are always able to exhaust the stamina and blood of their opponents in a war of attrition. Against such an army, decapitation is the best choice. As long as the undead lord falls, his army would become meaningless and might even disintegrate on its own. At this moment, the mage towers are temporarily deactivated and I can fly again. Furthermore, I am bringing along a silly lass as my trump card. I would be a fool if I didn't go straight to the main objective and find trouble with the undead lord. Spreading open my golden wings, I glide in the sky, leaving a trail of golden light wherever I pass by. As for the weight in my hands, my 20 points of basic strength allowed the female knight in my right hand to bear the weight. Boom! However, it is evident that my flying skills are still lacking. In a moment of carelessness, I knock into the sail of the number 6 assault airship. I am fine, but a large hole in the shape of a female elf appears on the sail. I casually cut off the mast. Looking at the chaos on the enemy's airship, I pull it up again. Lamans didn't miss this opportunity. Taking advantage of the fact that the enemy has stopped moving, he accurately shoots a bullet at the ammunition warehouse, causing number 6 to explode into sparks. The situation in the sky has become 1 against 2. The side with fewer numbers has the legend-ranked droll and an ace archer, so I don't have to worry about the situation in the sky anymore. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Looking at Diana, who was seeing stars, I whispered apologetically. You must have done it on purpose. No, I really didn't mean it before. But this time, I did it on purpose. Looking at my loosened right hand and the screaming Diana below, I smiled gleefully. This time, I really did loosen my grip on purpose, and it seems that my aim was quite accurate. Boom! The pitiful number 5 deck is smashed through. The Lich that I had my eyes on is smashed into minced meat by the female knight. The shockingly heavy Diana's momentum doesn't decrease at all, and she actually falls directly to the second floor. Diana, I will give you 2 minutes. Clear all the high-level undead on this ship. However, what is strange is that I didn't hear the expected sounds of killing. Instead, after a series of dong-dong-dong footsteps, Diana runs up to the deck from the lower floor. Lord, hurry and bring me away. This ship is about to explode. All right, I trust her words. If you have any doubts, just say it on the way. As expected, just as I carried her and flew for a short distance, I heard the sound of an explosion behind me. Boom! This explosion is even louder than the previous one. It is obvious that the ammunition warehouse exploded together with something else. What happened? You fell on the ammunition warehouse? Why have I been so unlucky recently? Diana, who was muttering to herself, only regains her senses after hearing my question. When I was on the second floor, I smashed an undead knight to death. For the captain's hat, it should be the captain. In the end, I actually fell straight to the third floor, right into the engine room, and ended up landing on the main engine. The engine is spoiled. If the engine is spoiled, it would explode immediately. Looks like the stability of this airship is really bad. It's not that. Diana scowls, but there's an embarrassed red blush on her face. Just as I stood up, I touched a button with a red skull on it. When I stood up, I accidentally pressed it. All right, since we are all from Sulphur Mountain City, it is enough for me to say this much. Everyone knows about the bad habit of the goblin engineers to leave a red skull on them, and everyone knows what that skull represents. Smashing 2 high-level undead to death, and just touching the self-destruct button when I stood up? This luck. Choosing you as my bodyguard is indeed the right choice. What a good lightning rod of bad luck. No wonder I felt that my luck has been good recently. Looks like with the help of the Star of Comet, all my bad luck has been absorbed by you. I nod my head in satisfaction. On the other hand, Diana's face is filled with helplessness and confusion. However, there isn't any time for me to sigh or explain. At the top of the tallest mage tower, under the protection of a group of undead knight, Kalishan is summoning burst flames. His target is obviously us who are threatening him. Darsos, you cursed bastard. You traitors, Kalishan, should be the next Ottoman emperor. All right, this Lich still thinks that we are Dasos's men, but there is no need for me to explain. And then, Your Majesty, let me send you on your way. Suddenly, the voice of the Queen of Banshees rings in my ears. He is actually an old acquaintance. Look at the ring on his hand. Looking carefully, I notice the celestial emblem on the Lich's right hand. I immediately fly into a rage. Darn celestial tower, to think that they would have their men here as well. I'm not talking about that. Look at the emblem of a cross between a magic book and a magic staff on his left pinky ring. He should be my nominal disciple, your junior. Even if he is my junior, is there a difference? No, I'm just reminding you to be careful. My nominal disciples aren't easy to deal with. Every one of them has at least a few underhanded moves and trump cards. Don't treat him as an ordinary lich. Chapter 107. Kalishan, mean, the blood-related uncle of the current Emperor Dasos. Mean and the younger brother of the previous Emperor Krovan. Mean from the same mother. As a mage, not only was he the head of the court mages, he was also one of the top 3 generals in the Ottoman military. In his later years, the old emperor even handed over the air fleet, an important weapon of the country, to him. But in reality, Kalashin had never been convinced by his elder brother. He helped Crovan in the battle for the throne of the previous generation because they were born from the same mother. If he didn't help his blood-related elder brother to seize the throne, he would be killed by the other princes. But in reality, as the number one genius of the previous royal family, his dream of becoming the emperor had never been extinguished. In fact, in order to obtain power, he hid his identity when he was young and went to the terrifying Shua Empire to learn necromancy. He even became the disciple of the third senator, the Queen of Banshees, Heloise, and specialized in death magic. Yes, on the surface, he was a legend-rank fire mage, but in reality, he was also a saint-rank necromancer. It wasn't without reason that necromancers were viewed as evil. Other than the drawbacks of disturbing the dead, this kind of evil magic could increase its power by sacrificing the living and devouring the flesh, blood, and souls. Along with the crazy increase in power, one's mind would often lag behind and be corroded by the power that exceeded one's capacity, causing changes in all aspects. For example, necromancers were famous for not treating humans as humans. The further they progressed, the more indifferent they became to life and death. Demon warlocks and soul reapers, on the other hand, the more inhuman they became, drooling at the sight of the souls of others. Blood mages, on the other hand, were more vampiric than vampires when they reached the bloodthirsty stage. They looked at humans as if they were looking at food. The words of evil priests who obtained power from the evil gods would become more and more fanatical as they progressed, losing their sense of self and becoming the puppet of the evil gods. Of course, you could also take it one step at a time and slowly digest it, completely transforming this unorthodox power into a magic sword in your hand instead of being controlled by the magic sword. However, for some people, if they wanted to take it one step at a time, why would they need to practice evil magic? The side effects of having their personality affected were completely acceptable. The most alluring part of these non-mainstream magic spells was that it was very easy to achieve immortality, although this immortality would most likely require an additional price. For example, for necromancers, if they didn't meet with accidents, even if they weren't skilled enough to become a lich, it wouldn't be difficult for them to transform into a skeleton mage or lich. For humans who fear death and the unknown, the temptation of immortality is sometimes hard to resist, especially for ambitious people who yearn for the peak. Of course, it was also possible to obtain immortality if one cultivated to the peak through normal means, such as Valkyrie, oracles, and divine pets. However, there was still a price to pay for such immortality. Although it seemed very noble and high class, in reality, they would become servants and thugs of the gods. Kalashin, who had already achieved immortality, had always been ambitious. However, it was a pity that although his personal strength was negligible, his brother Crow had deep attainments in politics and military affairs. Under his governance, the strength of the Ottoman Empire was rising day by day. Heroes are born in troubled times. If the world was not chaotic and the country was stable, there wouldn't be much soil for trouble. Naturally, these ambitious people had to hide their foxtails and pretend to be loyal and capable ministers. Thus, even though Kalashin was a saint-rank archmage, not only did he pretend to be a legend rank, he even groomed a large number of loyal subordinates during his many years in the military. He controlled close to 30% of the White Wolf Guards, waiting for a flaw to appear in Crow's governance. He had long seen through his nephew Dasos' ill intentions, but he still helped him cover it up. As long as Dasos makes his move, it might be the day that he would fish in troubled waters and rise to power. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, Kalashin was too outstanding in pretending to be a loyal minister. Or perhaps Crow had already seen through his younger brother's ambitions and was worried that there would be problems when he succeeded the throne. Thus, he allowed Kalashin to accept the position of the commander-in-chief of the underwater base. After discovering the greatest trump card of the Ottoman Empire, how could he let it slip by? Thus, when Dasos made his move, this ambitious uncle was trapped in the base instead, missing out on a golden opportunity. All right, let's not talk about how this ambitious and unlucky fellow was eliminated for such a laughable reason. What we are facing now is the final rage of an ambitious schemer who had been preparing for decades. Die. The moment I raise my staff, the pitch-black power of death morphs into a ghostly finger and shoots towards me. Instantaneous Death's Finger? It can't be. Death's Finger is an 8-circle necromancy spell that only legend-rank necromancers are able to grasp. To instantaneously cast it, the difficulty would be raised by at least 2 circles. This isn't something that a saint-rank necromancer would be able to do. You are still thinking about this even when death is at your doorstep, seeking your own death? Actually, if this Death's Finger were to be directed at Diana, even a legend-rank magic-resistant female knight would shiver in fear. However, if it were to be directed at me, perfect courage, immune to fear-type, death-type magic and talents, the user will always be in a state of high fighting spirit. This effect can be shared with 3 party members. The complete version of Pale Justice is indeed worthy of being the holy light, sacred sword of the Order faction. As expected of a Saint Knight who is an undead slayer, it is a perfect counter to necromancers. High-circle necromancy spells have a lot of death-type and fear-type effects, but he is immune to these 2 effects. He really doesn't give necromancers any chance of survival. As expected, when Death's Finger hits me, the sacred sword that is enveloped in golden holy light suddenly shines, and the pitch-black power of death starts to dissipate. However, even after the death effect of this 8-circle spell is dispelled, the shockwave from the power of death is still not something that a bronze-rank rookie can withstand. The ice armor immediately shatters, and the shockwave sends me flying. I can't help but break out in cold sweat. If it wasn't for the ice armor, with my current weak physical body, I might have died on the spot. Life withering. All right, this time it isn't an instantaneous spell. However, to be able to cast a 9-circle saint rank spell so calmly, it is too ridiculous. How is this a saint rank mage? This is practically a myth rank mage. Go! I share the aura of perfect courage with her, just in time, so that the breath of death that evaporates all the water in the area and absorbs the power of life doesn't have an instant death effect. However, even so, Diana is still sent flying and spits out blood. This time, the outstanding defense of the full body armor saves her. The Lich's choice of this spell is really smart. With both the evaporation damage and the death effect, Diana's magic-resistant skin isn't of much use. The Dark King's Breath of Death. That is a semi-god equipment. This is the treasure of an undead mage. The black cat on my shoulder exclaims in shock and explains the reason behind it. With this weapon that belonged to an ancient semi-god undead emperor, Callison is able to throw out high-circle instant death spells with such powerful effects. I have already spread my wings and soared into the sky to avoid being locked on by the enemy's spells. Looking around, I still feel that the situation is far from good. Callison's guards have already caught up to us. The Death Knight's explosive spears are still a huge problem. If we don't end this battle quickly, not only will our plan to decapitate the leader fail, both Diana and I might die here. Looking at Diana, who is struggling to get up, I know that the 9-circle spell that was buffed by the semi-god equipment must have injured her quite badly. Damn it, this semi-god equipment is too ridiculous. How can it cast high-circle spells so quickly? Is there no way to counter it? Think, there are no perfect people in this world. Hurry up and think. Breath of Death? This name should be used to strengthen the effects of instant death spells. Even with the sacred sword's perfect courage, the impact of the power of death is still fatal. In this day and age, apart from the dead, who isn't afraid of the power of death? If I knew this earlier, I wouldn't have revived. Wait a moment, the dead? In an instant, a devious idea appears in my list of options. Thus, I chuckle to myself. You have an idea? Of course, this is a tradition. When Callison noticed that he was unable to lock onto me, who was moving at high speed, he focused his gaze on Diana. The next instant, I directly charged down. Foolish living being, accept the misfortune that is destined to you. As expected, a black ray of light shot towards me. This was the sixth circle undead spell, physical exhaustion. Since 2 high circle instant death spells were unable to kill me, Callison suspected that we had some sort of treasure that was immune to the effects of death, which was why he chose this spell. Physical exhaustion inherited the viciousness of undead spells. It would make the target feel as if they had just run 2 marathons while carrying 200 kilograms of rice sacks on their backs. It was especially effective against warriors who relied on their stamina to survive. It was nicknamed the close combat killer, and if the weak were hit by it, it was possible for them to die from exhaustion. Seeing that the ray of light was too fast for me to change directions in time and was about to collide with it, Diana grit her teeth and charged forward. She opened her hands, intending to try her luck with her magic-resistant skin. As for me, get out of my way. I unhesitatingly pushed away the foolish girl and collided with the ray of light myself. Ah! In the midst of the pitch-black light, I couldn't help but scream in agony. The next moment, I violently fell to the ground and rolled around in pain. Even my golden wings started to disintegrate. The living are truly foolish. To actually play such a laughable game of friendship at such a time? What? Sundering evil slash. I fell less than 5 meters away from the Lich. I pretended to roll for another 2 meters before I suddenly leapt up and covered the distance of 3 meters in a single leap. The sacred sword Pale Justice carried a fatal holy light as it slashed down on his head. It was already impossible for him to dodge. Clang! Even though the Lich was forced to his knees by brute force, the sacred sword was actually blocked by a pitch-black short staff. Could the semi-god equipment's basic attribute of sturdiness be used in such a manner? The green soul fire in the Lich's eye sockets started burning. Judging from his jaw that kept opening and closing, he was actually beginning to chant a major spell. Descend from the dark core hell. The darn cat's rich knowledge of magic allowed her to instantly recognize that this was a 10th circle myth-ranked forbidden spell. Furthermore, it was an AoE spell that was a combination of the undead and fire elements. As long as he completed this spell, the entire platform would turn into a volcanic crater of the dark core hell. We definitely wouldn't be able to escape, and naturally, he wouldn't be able to escape either. As long as the Lich's phylactery wasn't destroyed, he could revive over and over again. Obviously, after being forced to this point, Callison no longer had any confidence in escaping unscathed. He intended to perish together with us before reviving himself. In reality, the reason why Liches were hated by adventurers wasn't just because they were difficult to deal with, but also because of their bad habit of perishing together at the slightest provocation. The sword and the staff clashed. The distance between us was close enough. The skull was filled with malicious intent and even carried a hint of glee. However, since I was already so close to you, you still dare to chant a spell. Aren't you looking down on me? What do you want? Take it. Thus, I unhesitatingly let go of my weapon that was in a stalemate. Under the Lich's confused gaze, I stretched out my hand. Taste my flying dragon cloud, reaching hand. Gotcha! A crisp sound echoed. The chanting stopped because I had already removed the Lich's jaw. Let me give your bones a bath and do some maintenance. Dragon cloud reaching hand. Dragon cloud reaching hand. I drew my bow with both hands and fired from both sides. Following that, the ribs were removed, the bones of the hands were removed, and the vertebrae were removed as well. Then, with a violent slap and a shake, the entire skeleton started to fall apart. As an experienced Lich, I couldn't even remember how many times I had removed my own bones to do maintenance over the past few hundred years. Just like how an experienced veteran could close their eyes to dismantle a gun, I could also close my eyes to dismantle a skeleton into its bones before closing my eyes to put it back together. In a short 10 seconds, all that was left of Lich Callison was a skull without a chin. Without any hesitation, I stabbed the holy sword into the soul fire within the skull. As expected, a bizarre soul fluctuation spread, and we could faintly hear a scream of agony coming from the depths of the soul. All right, his soul fire has been burned by the holy flames. Even if he revives, it will take at least a few days. Done and done. Next, we need to find his phylactery before he revives. Indeed, it was done and done. After Callison collapsed, the undead army's weakness of relying too much on the undead lord showed itself once again. A large number of low-level undead who were directly controlled by his undead magic collapsed. A few intelligent undead shouted slogans, such as "Ottoman people, don't fight Ottoman people. We were all forced to do this. Actually, we are all good citizens. Actually, I am your father," and so on. Of course, the moment they shouted the last one, they were immediately beaten up by the undead. Take them in and ask them where their phylactery is. Forget it. It's impossible for them to know such things. Let's just ask Callison where his room is. Now is my favorite time to collect the spoils of war. To punish evil. Just as I smiled and put away the Dark King's breath of death, Diana suddenly pounced on me. "Are you all right? How did you make that evil magic not work?" "Oomph. What do you mean by not working? I paid a terrible price for it. Look." I opened my shirt collar, and a black cat with half of her body exposed was currently fighting with my sturdy throat. She bit, gnawed, and scratched, using both her claws and teeth, but she was unable to break through my skin. But when she saw me looking at her, she unhesitatingly spat at me. Look, a cat shield. Dodging that harmless attack, I pulled her down and knocked her unconscious. Then I held her in my hand and made a defensive stance as if she was a shield. How can a kitty block such evil magic? Faced with Diana's question, I pretended to smile mysteriously and didn't reply. Was I supposed to tell her that this darn cat looked cute, but was actually an evil, undead creature? All right. Actually, there was no need to use quotation marks on the word evil. If the Queen of Banshees, Heloise, wasn't evil, then everyone in the world would be a saint. Yes, the tradition that I was talking about previously was the tradition of our path to trap mages. Back then, I thought that the already dead Heloise would be an excellent meat shield against an undead mage. Heloise is currently an undead slime. Although she has a portion of the functions of a living being, she is still an undead creation of mine. Using death magic on an undead is no different from throwing a fireball at a fire elemental. Other than making the other party stronger, what other effects does it have? Thus, after using the cat shield to block the body fading ray formed from death magic, I actually didn't suffer any losses. After a performance, I was able to enter close range for a surprise attack. If a mage were to be caught off guard and allow a close combat mage to get close to him, this was also taking advantage of the opponent's lack of combat experience. In my estimation, the esteemed Callison must have been casting his spells safely under the protection of many guards for a long period of time. How could he have thought of such a sneaky move? And as expected, I succeeded. Whoa, you traitorous disciples only know how to bully me. I knew that none of you had good intentions. I must have been blind to take you in as my disciples back then. Teacher, I finally know how you felt when I stabbed you in the back then. Now, I have also been stabbed in the back, and it was by two of my disciples, one from the front and one from the back. I will never teach any more disciples. Woo-woo. All right, the only one who was injured was the frightened Heloise, as well as her heart as an educator that had been completely broken. Stop pretending. If you're on good terms with Callison, why didn't you say it earlier? Which of your disciples haven't been tricked by you before? Most probably, if he knew that it was you, he would be even more vicious in his actions. Also, have you forgotten? The existence of the magic pet contract makes it impossible to hide your true feelings from me. Do you think that such a small matter would make you so desperate? All right, after I exposed her, the next moment, Diana was shocked to see that the darn cat immediately calmed down. However, her face was still filled with displeasure. Eat the semi-god scepter for me. I want to strengthen this physical body of mine. I have had enough of being a pet. Sure, act cute for me. If I am satisfied, I will give it to you. Thus, the little cat smiled mysteriously. Meow, Lord Master, can you give me that thick black short stick? He really wants to eat that stick, I beg of you. Meow. Pooh. All right. I underestimated the lower limit of the darn cat. My original intention was just to tease her, to make her do 2 somersaults and bark like a dog. The moment those words came out, not only did I burst into laughter, Diana also looked at me with a strange gaze. This silly girl believed whatever others said. She probably thought that I was a gentleman, pervert, again, on the same level as Bayfoam. However, I had originally intended to throw this semi-god equipment to her. After all, bringing along a semi-god equipment of the undead element in the human world was simply asking for trouble. Furthermore, after Heloise ate it, it would be more convenient for me to use it. Can you think about it a little more? No matter how thirsty I am, I won't go into heat on a cat. Just as I explained, Heloise, who was behind me, smiled evilly. After a series of distortions, she turned into a cute golden-haired elf girl. Although she reverted back to her original form in the next second, it was enough to leave a deep impression on the legend rank knight. Without a doubt, this was the revenge of the cat shield. No wonder it is called the Gentleman Alliance. So you're also a gentleman, pervert, to actually turn your cat into a girl. Just how? All right, she didn't even use honorifics anymore. Looks like her image has been ruined quite badly this time. Actually, it's understandable for men to be gentlemanly. If you really can't stand it, you can actually consider Momo. Although she's always very harsh, she has always been a good girl, and she has always liked you. Forget it. She definitely can't. She definitely can't. Diana's untimely matchmaking reminded me of a few days ago, when we were choosing an Aurora Knight. Momo, who is also a silver rank, also came to join in the fun. Initially, with her decent strength, she had a chance of succeeding, but the moment she opened her mouth. Is there anyone who can turn into a cute Shota? It's an 8 or 9-year-old boy. All right, I have a portrait of little Luo here. Can you turn it into one? Big Sister Shiva, help me turn him into one. Seeing that I blocked the arrow for you just now, it will be enough. In just a moment, one wave is enough. I want to see little Luo, but I can't beat that pervert. Ooh, Momo's life is so bitter. Looking at Momo, who is pestering Shiva on the airship, in the end, Diana sighs helplessly. It is because she is getting weirder and weirder that I want to marry her off as soon as possible. If you can't deal with her yourself, you send her out to harm others? Diana, you have also become bad. However, I still have to thank you for the night attack alarm last night. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Actually, it is your fault. She was clearly very normal in the past. How can you blame me for this? It is obviously her. All right, it is all my fault. At this moment, I can't help but recall that weird title of King of Gentlemen. What does it mean by all gentlemen will take the initiative to join your ranks? I haven't met many normal people along the way. Ding! Congratulations to the host for discovering the hidden effect of the King of Gentlemen. Not only will it make gentlemen voluntarily join your faction, but will also turn ordinary people into gentlemen. It will turn a little gentleman into a great gentleman into a divine gentleman, and a divine gentleman into the King of Gentlemen. System notification. Look, I gave you the highest gentleman honor achievement right from the start. How considerate of me. Consider it your sister. Do you think that there aren't enough gentlemen? While we are celebrating our victory in the underwater base and worrying about the gray elves that are getting weirder and weirder in the palace of the Ottoman Empire, His Majesty the Emperor is meeting with an esteemed guest. With your help, what does that 9-headed smelly snake amount to? Inform the ambassadors of the various countries that the enthronement ceremony will be brought forward to coincide with Lord Dragonslayer's great cause. We will be recorded in the annals of history together. Your Majesty praises me too much. I am just an old man who doesn't have enough power. I might be able to chase away the 9-headed dragon emperor, but killing him is basically impossible. The venerable god's mission is for me to not go overboard. Despite having the appearance of a handsome young man, he speaks with the tone of an old man. From his fair skin that is tinged with gold and the faint halo of light at the back of his head, he is an immortal, but Valkyrie, a servant of a true god. After a round of pleasantries, Desos sends Valkyrie away. His previous arrogance turn into a cautious expression. Loaned to Basra, when his opponent is a dragon, will he show mercy and not go overboard? That's insane. Sending this bloodthirsty Valkyrie down to the mortal world. Is the moon goddess intending to have a decisive battle with Lady Storm? Damn it, get the entire army to make preparations. If things go wrong, things might get out of hand. Then why are you still making use of this opportunity to hold the enthronement ceremony? It's not like you don't know how many ambassadors find excuses to leave every day. If the Ottoman Empire wants to become a superpower, they must form an alliance. Now that we are riding a tiger, it's hard to get off. Since the ending can't get any worse, why don't we take a gamble? Chapter 108. The undead calamity's weakness of relying too much on the undead at the head level was its weakness. Following the fall of the Lich, Calison's undead army also disintegrated. In the eyes of us, who were once undead lords, this meant that the composition of this army was extremely chaotic. The more mature an undead army was, the more mid-tier and high-tier undead there were. The more mid-tier commanders there were, the stronger the low-tier cannon fodder would become and the less afraid of being beheaded. However, after the fall of Emperor Yongye, the Yongye army immediately disintegrated and went to the other extreme. There were too many mid-tier and high-tier undead, to the point that after losing Emperor Yongye, with the allure of the country of the undead and the Eternal Night Scepter, too many experts tried to climb to the top, but ended up falling into internal strife. Speaking of which, that junior Lich is really stupid. To actually chant such a long incantation in front of a melee fighter. Is he tired of living? Was this also taught by you? His combat experience is so lacking. Looks like your teaching standards are getting worse and worse. The darn cat on my shoulder was so angry that her fur was standing on end. If it wasn't for the fact that her teeth were broken when she tried to bite me, she would definitely pounce on me again. I understood her. Usually, she was as thick-skinned as me and didn't care about anything I said. However, as long as her magic standards and teaching standard were questioned, she would definitely jump up in anger. That wasn't taught by me. I wouldn't teach such basic things. It was obviously that idiot who lacked combat experience. I'm not a kindergarten teacher. Why do I have to repeatedly teach such basic things? Yes, the basics. As a weak magic job, keeping a distance from a melee fighter was the most important thing. In a battle between a high-tier mage and a melee fighter, the melee fighter would try his best to close the distance, while the mages would use defensive magic to dodge or teleport to widen the distance. The two would cycle back and forth until one side finally revealed an opening. That would be the moment of victory. In the end, the mages would either have enough distance and time to concentrate their firepower on killing the melee fighter, or the melee fighter would exhaust the opponent's defensive magic, escape magic, and control magic, and be chopped into pieces by the kitchen team. Truthfully, this was very unfair. Magical classes could make multiple mistakes, but melee classes could lose their lives if they made a single mistake. In most cases, it was true that the melee classes could not catch up to the magical classes no matter how hard they tried, resulting in them being toyed with to death. However, there is no such thing as absolute fairness in this world. Magic classes had extremely high requirements for talent. Among humans, magic classes were less than 1/10 of those of the same tier, and they required a lot of time and wealth to nurture. Hence, it was easier for magic classes to obtain a high status in human society than melee classes. As a court archmage and a prince of the royal family, Calison undoubtedly held real power. However, another aspect of his high status was that he lacked the opportunity to practice in actual combat. Whenever he went out, he would always be accompanied by a large number of bodyguards. How could he be allowed to personally fight for his life? Should it be said that he was immature to the point of being naive? This junior of mine is actually chanting an incantation in front of me. Even if my rank is much lower than his, there is no need for him to ignore me like this. Even if I don't forcefully tear him apart, Pale Justice will attack me a few more times, and I will be finished sooner or later. I feel that we should expel Calison from our school. I have never taught such a shameful disciple. You should just be happy. If it wasn't for the fact that this guy lacks actual combat experience to the point of being ridiculous, with that Saint rank weapon and his strength as a Saint rank Lich, you would definitely not be able to win. Heloise's words were very honest. This really couldn't be blamed on my teacher for not teaching me well. It was obvious that he usually relied on his saint rank weapon and saint rank strength to use high circle spells to kill everything. Now that he met an unkillable opponent, he panicked and messed around. If it wasn't for Callison being foolish enough, with his legendary fire and saint rank undead strength and that saint rank weapon, he would have at least a dozen ways to win. No matter what, he wouldn't have been instantly killed. This fully confirmed the old saying, no matter how good one's martial arts is, if one's brain isn't good, sooner or later one will be smashed by a brick. I nodded my head with a heavy expression, but a smile was already forming on my lips. This junior of mine is simply the captain of a treasure delivery team. The equipment on him is really not bad. I will kindly accept this saint rank weapon. Dark God's Breath of Death Attack Power. 1 to 2, saint rank weapon one-handed scepter. Usage requirement. Intelligence 15+, high rank necromancer breath of death. Able to store up to 3/8 circle, legendary rank, death type spells. As long as it is activated, it can be instantly cast. If it is a 9th circle spell, epic rank, it can be cast without using any materials. However, you can only store 1/9 circle spell. Domain of Death. With the scepter as the core, there exists an invisible domain of death. In this domain, the effects of death magic will be amplified by 50%, and the success rate of instant death will be increased by 30%. Face of the Dead. The user's intelligence increases by 2 points, physique increases by 2 points, and they are immune to fear and death-type abilities. However, their charm will be reduced by 10 points. This attribute can be reduced to a negative number. Dark God's Protection. Summon an invisible shield that absorbs 200 points of magic damage or magic weapon damage. Before the shield is broken, the user will be immune to stun, transformation, and other control-type spells. Lasts for 10 seconds. Dark God's Rage. Active ability. After using it, the user's next spell will carry an instant death effect, even if it is just an ordinary magic missile. The instant death effect is equivalent to the rank of the spell. Soul Conversion. Extract the soul of the dead and convert it into pure death magic. The ancient undead emperor, the Dark God, once reached the pinnacle of the domain of death. Legend has it that just by breathing, he is able to make the living enter the realm of death. Even though he has already fallen, this semi-god equipment still contains a portion of his soul shards. Perhaps an undead lord can use this to comprehend the mysteries of death and enter the supreme throne of a semi-god undead emperor. This is a typical semi-god equipment for combat. Not mentioning the mysteries of the undead emperor soul shards that are able to drive undead lords crazy. It is, after all, a mirage that depends on luck. The 3 instant cast death-type spells of Breath of Death are already shocking super killing machines. With this Breath of Death, there's no need to look at other abilities. Who would be able to withstand 3 death-type spells that he casually throws out? Furthermore, coupled with the soul conversion ability, he does not need to worry about exhausting his mana. It is no wonder that Callison's combat experience is lacking. With this semi-god equipment, he is probably already used to the exhilaration of killing everything in an instant. Even if he is obstructed for a moment, he can just extract a few more souls and bombard them once more. You said that I'm a cannon type, but this junior is obviously a super cannon type. As for that Dark God's Protection, it seems that I have underestimated him. Back then, when he chanted the incantation to perish together with me, he should have been using this shield. For 200 points of damage, I would probably have to slash at least 7 to 8 times. Even if the shield were to break, I would still be able to make a second reaction. However, he did not expect that I am completely different from my previous opponents. When challenging a powerful Lich, I did not use a godly weapon. Instead, I used my bare hands to tear apart his bones. The moment I made a move, he was unable to chant the incantation normally. Naturally, I was defeated. If this toy were to be brought outside, the moment it is revealed, the Holy Church would immediately suppress me. I intended to let Heloise eat it, but devouring a semi-god equipment is something that she is unable to do at the moment. She still needs to make many preparations. Thus, I kept it with a face full of joy. Just as my evaluation of Callison slightly increased, due to the fact that the defensive ability did not work as expected. 5 minutes later, this overly high evaluation of him collapsed once more. This, I really did not teach him. I don't know him. I believe that such a foolish student cannot be explained by the fact that a teacher did not teach him well. This is a congenital type of brain damage that no medicine can cure. This kind of intelligence is comparable to that of a silly girl. How did he advance to saint rank? The moment we walked into Calison's room in the Mage Tower, we naturally intended to collect the spoils of war. However, just as we started searching, we found a square box under the bed. Opening it, we saw a blue bottle wrapped in velvet. Within the bottle, there was a quietly burning soul fire. If there wasn't a second Lich here, then this toy would definitely be Calison's phylactery. It was a textbook example of a standard soul bottle. Furthermore, he was afraid of losing it, so he kept it in a box. To be able to explain the term phylactery to such an extent, it was truly a miracle. While other Liches would repeatedly disguise their phylactery, fearing that it would be discovered by others, this phylactery, which was open and undisguised, actually frightened us. Hey, Heloise, if you were to transform into a Lich here, how would you create a phylactery? Just find a random item and after transforming it, throw it into the water. I guarantee that no one will be able to find it. You? I would place it in an ordinary brick and then place the brick on the main road here. This way, passers-by would never know that a Lich's phylactery is right beneath their feet. The two of us looked at each other and saw the mirth in each other's eyes. Sigh, how unfortunate. We should have added an intelligence test to the entrance exam. Don't tell others that I'm his senior. We can't afford to lose face like this. The two of them sighed together. Finally, someone couldn't bear to listen to such sarcasm. Bastard Dasos, do you think that you can insult me as you please just because I've lost? No matter what, I'm still an Ottoman prince. Senior? Do you know who my teacher is? You. Shake it. I'm so dizzy, stop shaking it. One of the reasons why the textbook soul bottle was abandoned by most Liches was because the souls contained in the bottle were far too weak. With just a slight shake, Calison unhesitatingly surrendered. This technique is so familiar. Yep, I learned it from you, silly cat. All right. Ignoring the silly cat who was going all out to bite me again, I turned my attention to Calison's phylactery, who fell silent again. All right, let me reintroduce myself. Why am I your senior? Yep, I should also be the oldest senior to have survived until now. I am Roland Mist, and this silly cat is our teacher, Heloise. How is this possible? Calison was unable to remain silent anymore. Not only did she expose his teacher, how did the fearsome Banshee Queen turn into a soft little kitten? However, that black cat glared at her in annoyance. A ghost-like figure flashed behind its back and disappeared. That familiar soul ripple was the best calling card for her. How have you been? By the way, don't tell others that you are my disciple. It's too embarrassing. By the way, Harlock, Calison's pseudonym, I'm no longer angry after seeing you like this. Let's forget about our past grudges. Of course, you can also refuse. We'll settle our scores again. The soul fire surged in the bottle. If the bottle could nod freely, it would have already become a roly-poly toy. Teacher Heloise, you're speaking as if I'm the one who has wronged you. It's obvious that we were all tricked by you. If you want revenge, we should be the ones looking for you. All right, I won't say any more. Noticing that the black cat was baring its fangs, Calison recalled the cat's petty and calculative personality and the fact that he had fallen into its hands. Wait, the oldest senior brother? Rumor had it that he was also Heloise's disciple. Rumor had it that he was indeed from the Mist Kingdom. Forever and ever, Emperor Yongya. All right, the reverberation of the soul reverberated in the room, revealing the fear and shock contained within. A person's name was like the shadow of a tree. As the only undead emperor in the modern era, as the creator of the strongest undead calamity in the modern era, Yongya, Emperor Yongya, was an existence that all undead mages couldn't avoid. He was an unsurpassable monument, as well as an existence that people feared. It's me. You don't have to be so surprised. You are now an undying existence. Is it that surprising that I didn't die? I had expected him to throw away his identity. The world of the undead was actually much simpler than that of the living. It was common for the strong to be respected. With the golden name of Emperor Yongya, the reality of his failure, and the phylactery in my hands, I didn't think that he would be able to play any tricks. I won't say too much nonsense. You just have to listen to me from now on. We are all in the same profession, and there are many ways to torture the soul. If you want to play any tricks, go ahead. But if the tricks you play are too indecent, too low class that I can't bear to watch, then I won't say much about what will happen to you. Don't need to say much equals think about it yourself, equals scare yourself. There was no limit to the imagination of an intelligent being. The more one was used to being cruel to others, the easier it was for them to think of even crueler ways to torture themselves. This method of inducing fear had always been effective, especially when the other party was an undead mage who specialized in torturing souls. If Callison was really a martyr who would rather die than submit, he wouldn't have turned himself into a Lich. Seeing that even the powerful Heloise was turned into a pet, what else could he possibly resist? And so, the next period of time was when I told the Lich to obediently do as I said. Let's do it this way. Since I can see that you have a grudge against Asos, when he opens the door, bring your army to fight against him. Of course, you'll lose in the end, but remember to self-destruct in a spectacular manner. Right, you still have to leave behind the information on the airships. Don't blow them up together. I didn't think that we would be able to hide it from Dasos after we develop an air fleet, but it was entirely possible to create a bit of chaos. The traces of the undead's existence were already impossible to hide, and the traces of the battle that had just occurred were even more obvious. In order to hide the traces of the battle, the easiest way would be to start a new battle. Of course, Heaven's Net has long arms, but nothing escapes. There were some things that should not be done. Once done, there would be traces that would eventually be exposed. For Donglon, who lacked everything, just the set of rare alloy equipment of the White Wolf Guard was a priceless treasure. It was impossible for us to let go of the spoils of war that we had collected here. The series of arrangements that we made next could only delay the time for us to be exposed. After the Ottoman Empire finishes dealing with the Sea Folk, the time for the war between the various countries in the War Vulture would also come. After the war, the Underground Coalition Army and the Undead Calamity would also arrive. As long as we get through the current trouble, I don't believe that he would still have the spare time to look for trouble with the Far North State. Moreover, by that time, when Donglon becomes stronger, it's still unknown who would be looking for trouble with whom. That's right. The 7 countries of the far north wouldn't be so content with their lot. Since they intend to settle down in Donglon, they should also be prepared to deal with the war. Of course, this is the territory of the Lich Callison after all. If we want to clean up the place quickly, it's best to get the other party's help. The most important thing at the moment is to make him obedient. If we want him to work in peace, we can't not give him a carrot after slapping him. I'm not unreasonable. If you listen to me, I'll give you whatever you want, whether it's the secrets of magic, divine weapons, or treasures, whatever you want. You should have heard that I am not a stingy person and my reputation has always been good. The promise of Emperor Yongya is very precious. Hearing my words, the soul fire in the bottle suddenly stagnates. Then it starts to burn crazily again. Pardon me for being presumptuous, but you and Lord Teacher are like this now? Could it be that you too have come back to life? There is nothing to hide about this, so I directly nod my head. Then do you too have the sense of touch? Do you have the desire for a physical body? I nod my head again. Although Heloise is still a half undead, her abilities are no different from a living person. Heloise's physical body was created by me. You should know my ability in this aspect. Why? Do you want me to help you create a physical body? Of course. I've already had enough of the days of being an undead. Indeed, I don't have hunger or thirst, but I also don't have the desire to enjoy delicacies. Indeed, I don't have the instinctive desire, but it still makes my life worse than death. Lord, I beg of you, as long as you allow me to regain the sense of touch and desire of a physical body, I am willing to pay any price. Sure, it is just the body of a man. It is simple, but let me make it clear first. Even if you're no different from a normal person in all aspects, you are still an undying undead on the inside. unable to leave behind any descendants. I am able to regain the sense of touch and desire, but crossing the boundary between life and death isn't something that the current me can do. It is enough for me to regain desire. It is enough for me to regain desire. I smile gleefully. I am not afraid of you asking for too much. I'm only afraid that you don't have any desires. Since you're begging me, naturally, it is easier for me to control you. All right, leave it to me. When the time comes, give me a portrait of your past, and I guarantee that I will restore it to the exact same state. Do you know how to make a female's body? At that moment, my feet slip and my hand loosens, almost dropping the phylactery on the floor. Based on my many years of experience of being scammed, I can already guess what is going to happen next. That cute boys, that is a small hobby of nobles. I believe that my lord will be able to understand. Although it was not bad in the past, if there is a chance, I still want to change it up. As though he is frightened by my steely expression, the next instant, Callison screams out his desire with all his might. No, I will be honest with my lord. This is my life's pursuit, and also the reason why I study necromancy. Shut up, you gay. I suppress the urge to smash the bottle and ignore the silly cat who is rolling around in laughter. It is obvious that she already knows that I don't want to interact with such a pervert. The next moment, I turn around and leave. My lord, don't go, I beg of you. This is the deepest desire of a fool who was born with the wrong body. Pooey, I already have enough gentlemen by my side, and this kind of gay pervert is challenging my limits and tolerance as a man. Thus, I don't stop walking. My lord, have you heard of the Customs? Of course I have. The flagship of the future Ottoman air fleet, the unsinkable Customs. That is a super battleship that will be known by everyone in the future. Of course I have heard of it, but if it is completed now, can't you tell? Besides, that is the flagship of the air fleet. It is not that easy to make. Of course it is not completed yet, but its prototype, the Prince Callison that I secretly built, is almost completed. My lord, as long as you fulfill my long-cherished wish, he is yours. Chapter 109. Even though I couldn't resist the temptation of a powerful warship in the end and agreed to this perverted condition, I still drew a clear line between him and me. After I'm done with this fellow, I'll tie him to a 1,000-kilogram boulder and throw him into the river. No, I'll feed him to Bayfoam. No, if Bayfoam were to be influenced by him and gain new attributes, that would be too scary. Let's call it sinking into the river. Those gentlemen are already troublesome enough to deal with. I definitely can't allow them to mix together. I was disgusted. After all, I was still a normal person. Definitely a normal person. I wasn't some king of gentlemen. Darned Ottoman Empire. They might as well change their name to Ottoman Empire. A man who likes women and a man who thinks that he should be a woman. I think you two, uncle and nephew, make a perfect pair. However, with Callison's full cooperation, the goal of taking over the base was indeed much faster. When I saw the super warship in the dock of the Mage Tower, even I pinched the darn cat's tail. From her screams and sharp claws, I could confirm that I wasn't dreaming. Prince Callison, formerly known as Ottoman Warrior, is the prototype of the super warship Customs, but in reality, its performance far surpasses that of its sibling warship. Everyone knows that, just like the Roland II, whose performance far surpasses that of its peers, the prototype warship is built with money to prove the validity of the theory. It is understandable that Prince Callison's performance is above that of Customs. Prince Callison, a super heavy warship, 243 meters in length and 40 meters in width. It has 9 heavy cannons charged with magic crystals, 7 medium mage towers, 1 super mage tower, 32 medium to small cannons, and a main cannon at the head of the warship has a maximum range of 30 kilometers. It has a built-in hangar that can store 3 Vulture assault ships. This warship can be used both in the water and in the air. It has a standard displacement of 65,000 tons after entering the water. It takes close to 10 minutes to float, and its maximum speed in the air is 120 kilometers per hour. As a flying unit, it isn't too fast. However, considering the massive size of the warship, I feel that the speed of this thing is already ridiculous. As the #1 warship of the Ottoman air fleet, Due to the disregard of cost, this super warship far surpasses Customs in terms of specifications, speed, and firepower. In the official records of the Ottoman Empire, due to a sudden explosion in the rear cabin during an experiment, it had sunk into the deep sea. Although the sinking and explosion were real, the crew members didn't die. Their families were well taken care of by Kalashin. After a year and a half, the reactivated Prince Kalashin entered the underwater base that was under the complete control of Kalashin. It became his trump card in the fight for the throne. This original flagship was also quietly waiting for the day when it was renamed to Emperor Kalashin. Furthermore, in order to better launch a surprise attack on the capital, when the 8 mage towers on the ship are activated, not only will they be able to provide an outstanding magic shield, the King Carlahan will also be able to enter a state of stealth. The entire warship is the culmination of the accumulation of the Ottoman Empire for hundreds of years. However, under the selfish desires of a certain person, it became a tool to fight for the throne. When Kalashin realized that the underwater base was isolated from the outside world, he acutely guessed that the day the door opens would be the day he breaks off with his nephew. In order to prepare for that day, after completing the test of the floating engine on the Vulture, he invested more than 90% of the resources and manpower into this huge warship. With the laborers, construction workers, and engineers who worked tirelessly, the completion rate of Prince Kalashin has already exceeded 95%. As for the ship that was originally given the highest priority, Customs, its completion rate is only slightly more than half. In history, when the dimensional door was opened more than 10 years later, Darsos was faced with a complete fleet. If it wasn't for the fact that his country was on the brink of destruction, and that the uncle and nephew were forced to reach a temporary truce, and that his reputation as the king of winter wolves was already known throughout the entire continent, Darsos would have been kicked off his throne. But now, this super warship that wasn't recorded in the official records has undoubtedly become a bargain for me. Walking from the Mage Tower to the basement, with Kalashin's help, the traps didn't obstruct us at all. Beside this super warship, there are many hard-working undead laborers and ace engineers. The weaker one is, the lower the chances of them retaining their intelligence after turning into an undead. In order to maintain their knowledge and intelligence, these ace engineers, who are known as the national treasures of the Ottoman Empire, as well as the experts and scholars of various fields, are still alive. Even though the remaining rations have been provided to them, this place isn't just isolated from the outside world for a day or two. They aren't even given a piece of biscuit every day, and they have to work hard. The result is that their emaciated appearance makes one think that they are skeleton soldiers. From a certain perspective, our ambush has saved them from the brink of death. First, they were forcefully moved here, and their loved ones were turned into undead engineers right in front of them. Their hatred towards the Ottoman Empire, Darsos, and Kalashin was unbelievably smooth just by saying that I am a citizen of the Donglan Principality. Of course, those who have survived until now are all intelligent people. They know how to make the right choice in order to continue living. It'll be completed by next month, and it'll barely be ready to set sail in 2 weeks. Looking at the ace engineer and grand scholar who were overjoyed to receive the jerky I handed over, I broke out in a cold sweat when I heard this news. If we had arrived a month later, we probably wouldn't have had any chance of victory at all. Prioritize the construction of the Mage Tower. If necessary, we can directly dismantle the Mage Tower's components. What we need the most right now is its stealth and ambushing abilities. I was filled with joy as I gave the new construction order. Obtaining this Mage Tower doubtlessly gave me much more hope and confidence in my future plans. Prince Kalashin. When I thought about how this was the name of a certain gay man, and how I might end up living in this ship named after a gay man, I unhesitatingly made changing the name of the ship the most important matter before considering anything else. I have always been a troublemaker when it comes to naming things. Just as I hesitantly called out the name Roland, the silly cat's faint voice said, "Have you forgotten about the Roland Titan? Do you intend to have a transformation or a full series of Roland?" This immediately made me give up on this idea. Then, I recalled the name of Law and Justice, so I suggested naming this ship Absolute Justice. However, The silly cats, is it the incurable disease, defeated me yet again. Love and courage. Little friend, how old are you today? Do you intend to make everyone laugh their heads off? The angry bird, I feel like I'll crash into a house if I don't crash into a pig's head. Think of something else. The grapes of wrath, I feel like I'll be unlucky all the way. I'll meet with an economic crisis and then go bankrupt. The angry banana, I'm not an angry squirrel. Think about it seriously. Don't think about small animals or fruits. Do you dare to think of a mighty and domineering name? The Archangel. Although the Archangel is indeed powerful, I always feel like it's an inauspicious name. Not only that, it's also super good at making its teammates suffer. The Snow Wind. Don't say anymore. It's even more inauspicious. I can feel chills running down my spine. The Daniel. Is there a difference from the one above? Can you not use such an inauspicious name? The Titanic. Are you unhappy if the ship doesn't sink? Do you have such a deep hatred for this ship? Can't you come up with a celebratory name? Assemble, gentlemen. Sure, I have no objections. But do your parents know that you're courting death? Do you think that you don't have enough gentlemen under you? The Wyvern. I know of more than 20 ships with this name. Are you sure you want to add a 3-digit identification code at the end? The Eliza White Queen. All right. A certain demon marquise crossed dimensions to angrily declare her existence. Rejected. You might as well call it the Primal Banshee Emperor. All right, silly cat. Your ultimate motive has been revealed. It feels like using a name that is filled with the ultimate evil boss will only result in self-destruction. It was an endless series of suggestions and rejections. It was a heartbreaking self-test. Once again, I confirmed that naming is indeed a troublesome matter. I thought of more than 20 names in a row, but all of them were rejected. Mysterious voice. Are you sure you're not asking for it? The Borealis. Although it feels like it's reflecting something, since it hasn't sunk yet, I'll just make do with it. The Borealis is a natural phenomenon unique to the northern lands. From a certain perspective, this name represents the desire for the mist country to break the ice and rise again. 2 more weeks? Can it be faster? The conclusion I got was depressing. 2 weeks later, it would barely be able to start up, but it would only be able to fly. Most of the cannons on the ship would be unusable. These 2 weeks were the best-case scenario. Looking at the current situation, there was an 80% chance that it would be delayed. Due to the damage caused to the energy pool by the previous attack and my intention to let the survivors who had managed to survive with great difficulty take a break and eat some good food to recover, the possibility of the delay was even higher. However, as long as it could be driven out, it would be able to fly while completing the remaining work. This was a piece of good news. Without a doubt, in the current situation where the Sea Folk and the Ottoman Empire were at a stalemate, and an all-out war could break out at any moment, this underwater base was the safest. Very quickly, I made a decision. Since the Ottoman Emperor has approved of our request to leave in the contract, it is about time for the envoy group from the Dalan Principality to return to the northern lands. After I returned to the surface, I would arrange for the convoy to return to the northern lands. At the very least, on the surface, I couldn't allow the envoy group to remain in this dangerous city. Renee, follow this name list and look for the people in the city. Those whose names are underlined in red must be invited, even if you have to resort to violence or kidnapping. Those whose names are in blue must be invited, but if you can't, don't force yourself. Those whose names are in purple must not resort to violence. Otherwise, you will become a troublesome target. Since we were fated to offend the Ottoman Empire, it didn't matter if we offended them a little more. Since we had already started to poach them, we might as well poach more of them. With these historical figures in our hands, regardless of whether it was us, the Dalan Principality, or the Ottoman Empire, the future would be different. After we find them, get them to bring their families here. Remember, tell them that this city is in danger and that we are saving them. This is the truth, so just go ahead and do it. With the underwater base and the Borealis in our hands, it was doubtlessly the first ray of hope in this chaotic situation. With this base that we could attack and defend at will, our safety was truly guaranteed. However, my good mood only lasted until we returned to the Church of Law. Inviting me to participate in the Ascension ceremony that will be held in advance? Am I crazy, or is Dasos crazy? As the Sea Folk's invasion progressed, and as the three main fleets were destroyed one by one, the Ottoman Empire gradually lost control of the rivers and the coastline. All the cities along the coast were being attacked by the Sea Folk. The Empire's defense forces were all mobilized, and the number of cities that had been massacred by the Piranha tribe had already exceeded 2 digits. While the capital was still maintaining a strange balance, the battles below were already a complete mess. Faced with the seemingly endless number of sea folk, the Ottoman Empire's not-so-powerful forces on the water began to cower. On the river that led to Kajisi City, the defending fleets of the humans were either completely annihilated or returned to the port of the city to seek help from the local defenders. Over 100 tribes were gathering and trekking. Under the guidance of the storm priests who wore the storm's sacred emblem, they had already completed the transition from mercenaries to regular soldiers. Among them, there were ugly and short fishmen, beautiful and pure mermaids, tall and sturdy sea giants, but most of them were the half-human, half-fish Naga sea folk and various water elementals. The simple training and grouping had already ended, and the sea folk were ready for battle. With the storm priests as the core, under the guidance of the true god Lady Storm, after a long trek, they saw their destination. The capital, the new capital that belongs to us. That was what they said. Chapter 110. Loan to Basra. Has the moon goddess gone mad? Why would she release this mad dog? The arrival of the powerful Valkyrie under the moon goddess isn't a secret. After all, the difference between a Valkyrie and a mortal is obvious. Not to mention that one doesn't seem to have any intention of hiding her identity at all. She spent her days in the city, living a normal life, and appearing in public is astonishingly high. In the legends of the Order gods, the Valkyrie are all incredible heroes in history. At the end of their lifespan, they were recognized by the true gods and signed a soul contract to fight for the true gods, becoming the glorious and undying warriors under the true gods. Of course, this is the positive side of things. But if I were to say it, the Valkyrie only look glamorous on the surface. Throw away those boring hymns, and, in reality, they're just another type of undead in the Order faction. Furthermore, they are unlucky fellows who accidentally signed a contract to sell themselves for life. They don't even have the freedom of a private life or annual leave. The most obvious point is that even though they have physical bodies and desires, they are unable to leave behind descendants. This is determined by the nature of their souls, which have already entered the cycle of reincarnation. No matter how they replace their physical bodies, it is the same. If it is just to restore their physical bodies and desires, my undead modification technique is able to do it too. On the other hand, the reincarnated god envoys and angels are able to leave behind descendants because they have already completed the cycle of reincarnation and become a living being once again. In reality, if an angel were to be transformed from a human, it is quite similar to the reincarnation of a demon from the lower plane. Furthermore, just like the undead, whose name is even nicer, the Valkyrie are also extremely obsessed. They are indeed great heroes in history, but great heroes don't mean that they are saints who have no desires. Even after becoming Valkyrie, they still maintain a high level of obsession with their hobbies and the past when they were alive. Basra's past experiences can be summed up with just a single word from his nickname, Longtu. He was a nobleman born as a wood elf. Back then, the Elven dynasty was still in its heyday. He should have had a happy childhood, but he didn't have many good days. In the era where he lived, the dragon race wasn't as rare as it is now. Just like in most fairy tales, he once had a blissful family. However, when a green dragon passed by his house, it casually spat out a mouthful of dragon breath. It's the same as how some uncivilized fellows spit out casually. However, if humans aren't civilized, they might only be met with an Annie with a red armband. The result of a dragon's uncivilized breath is that other than Bastler, who managed to escape from the calamity, everyone else was wiped out. Alright, the rest of the story was not worth mentioning. Under the wheel of history, the orphan youth slowly grew up and finally set foot on the peak of the world. However, even after he became famous, he still could not find the green dragon that killed his parents. Since I can't find it, I'll just kill all the evil dragons. This is not only for revenge, but also to prevent tragedies like mine from happening again. This was undoubtedly the arrogant words of a paranoid person. However, when the person who said this was a super strong person who had the ability to do it, the tragedy of the dragons came. He hated dragons to the core, and his hunting range was not limited to green dragons. In his eyes, these behemoths were always a threat. Only a dead dragon was a good dragon. That was why he was unscrupulous and didn't care whether they were good or evil. He didn't even spare young dragons and dragon eggs. As long as they were related to a real dragon, they deserved to die. The revenge of the dragons caused him to lose his wife, children, and friends. This caused him to be lonely once again, and he became a world-famous professional dragon slayer. As a perfect paranoid and dragon slayer hero, all of his abilities were prepared for the dragons. Dragon Slayer guns and Dragon Slayer swords were all equipped. There were records that he had killed at least 4 dragons, and there was no lack of demigod-level super dragons. When he aroused the wrath of the dragons and was surrounded and beaten to death, he also successfully dragged a 3-digit number of dragons down with him. Be obedient, baby. If you continue to make a fuss, Lone 2 Basra will come. These words became the trump card that dragon mothers used to scare their baby dragons. Through the knowledge passed down through their bloodlines, the young dragons knew that this code name represented countless dragon lives, and they were filled with fear of this name since they were young. Even the fearless little red had fallen asleep to childhood stories. When the name Basra was mentioned, she would definitely be filled with hesitation and unease. In fact, just because the moon goddess Patricia, who is also the goddess of the hunt and the guardian goddess of the lost, had taken in Basra's Valkyrie, she became the enemy of the dragons. Her relationship with the dragon god was extremely bad, and 2 divine wars had broken out between them. In terms of ability, it was absolutely no problem to send Basra down to the mortal world. Even if the body of Valkyrie could only barely reach the level of a demigod, he still had the combat power to rival the 9-headed dragon emperor. At the very least, this Valkyrie had descended to the mortal world 3 times before and had slaughtered 3 super dragons, and then killed hundreds of adult dragons along the way. In the eyes of the world, as long as it was a dragon, there was no dragon that he could not kill. As an outstanding hunter, before hunting a large prey, the first thing to do is to observe its habits, weaknesses, and personality. These days, Basra seemed to be strolling around, but in reality, he was observing his opponent's weaknesses. It's just that he doesn't make a move, but when he does, he will definitely kill without mercy. This was the evaluation of the veteran hunter, Lamans. Basra, who pursued hunting dragons for his entire life, was undoubtedly an idol in the eyes of ace hunters like Lamans. These days, this fugitive, escaped from prison, was willing to hide from the guards just to put on a hood and look at his idol from afar. And this kind of peeping naturally couldn't escape the sensitive senses of Basra. What was surprising was that the rumored bloodthirsty Lone 2 was actually very easy to get along with, and even took the initiative to chat with Lamans. When Lamans asked his idol for some hunting techniques, he even gave him some pointers. When Lamans asked for the reason, he replied like this: I can feel the cries of the beasts in your hands before they die. We are the same, so why would I be stingy? It's a pity that you aren't an elven ranger, nor do you know how to use a bow. Otherwise, I could teach you a few tricks of the Dragon Slayer. The younger generation nowadays is too weak, and there are far too few who actively challenge strong prey like you. Those cockroach-like lizards that lay eggs everywhere are about to go extinct. Saying that the Dragon Slayer was like a periodic extinction, this casual tone made Lamans deeply feel the strength of this Valkyrie and the bone-piercing hatred he had for dragons. This wasn't the only time the gentleman met with Basra. It's a pity I missed half of it. That Dragon Slayer who suddenly appeared as if he was just passing by, casually glanced at him and sighed, almost scaring Bayfong to death. The pitiful Draken Hunter was just strolling around the alleyway, as if he was taking a daily stroll, when he was stopped by the Valkyrie who smelled the scent of dragons. If it wasn't for the fact that most gods and mortals viewed draconians as a type of demi-humans and not descendants of dragons, Beifeng might have died on the spot. What a pity. This was what I casually said after I learned about this. But the moment I said this, I noticed that everyone around me was nodding in agreement. But the nine-headed dragon Emperor Hydra is a god's pet. Patricia had longed to come down, who won't show any mercy at all. Does she intend to directly start a war with Lady Storm? Indeed, there was no need to doubt his abilities. However, I had the same conclusion as Desos and the others. Basra definitely wouldn't show any mercy. That was the main problem. As long as he attacks, no matter if he wins or loses, the war will immediately escalate. We need to hurry. For me, every battle and the time after a battle was precious. Actual combat was the most direct and truest way to test one's abilities. No matter how beautiful or powerful one's natural talent or combat techniques were, it would always make one feel uneasy if they weren't tested in actual combat. As for me, I was used to summarizing my gains and losses after a battle. I would also write down everything I learned in my journal. Of course, the most important thing was to discover and make up for my weaknesses. Although this battle didn't last long, my opponent wasn't weak. After all, he was a saint rank undead mage. If I wasn't careful, it was indeed possible that I would die at his hands. Fine, I admit that I was wrong. The more I understood my junior Lich, the more I felt that it was impossible for me to lose to him. Even if I didn't succeed in defeating him, it would most likely be a protracted battle. In the end, it would still be us who were the weaker ones who obtained victory. Was it contradictory that the weaker one would definitely win? Actually, it wasn't contradictory at all. Callison's extreme lack of combat experience was only a part of the reason. His rotten and twisted soul was the main reason why it was impossible for him to win. A real world? This soul world sounds quite nice. What effects does it have? As an undead mage who specialized in instant death magic, Callison's soul imprint increased the effects of instant death. There was nothing special about it. However, I heard that he had a soul world. Not only that, it was a rare item that didn't simply increase one's stats, which astonished me greatly. The soul world of most saint-rank mages was only a simple modification of the surrounding environment to make it the most suitable environment for them to use their combat strength. For example, fire mages could transform the surrounding environment into a fire elemental plane. Although this would greatly increase the power of fire magic, it would consume a lot of energy in practical use, which would result in a low-cost performance ratio. Normal soul worlds were often used for large-scale battles or for several mages of the same element to fight together. The stacking of stats would allow one to turn a ring of ice into a blizzard, which would be quite frightening. On the other hand, unconventional soul worlds were the embodiment of one's personal experience and soul. Although there were thousands of differences in power, being able to modify the world with one's own will was enough to prove that one's willpower and determination were extraordinary. Furthermore, such soul worlds were often difficult to deal with and defend against. Having a special soul world was basically the privilege and status symbol of the strongest. I heard that Callison actually had a soul world named a real world. While I was curious about it, I also raised my evaluation of this junior of mine, which had already reached rock bottom. I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable. Does that soul world have any effects? Why didn't you use it back then? It's not that good. It's just a little bit of my personal obsession. It's like this. After listening to Callison's explanation, I directly lowered my evaluation of his soul world. This time, it wasn't a rock-bottom evaluation, but a basement evaluation. After listening to his introduction, Heloise emphasized to Callison that he mustn't say that he was his master. The reason? This soul world really made me speechless. Changing the gender of everyone within a certain range? What's the point of that? Can't you do something more serious? For example, seriously planning a coup d'état and an undead calamity. If you were slightly more normal, you would have long overthrown your older brother. But this is the deepest desire in the depths of my heart. And isn't a soul world a representation of the desire and desire in the depths of my heart? All right, although Callison's expression was sullen and his tone lacked confidence, his understanding of a soul world wasn't wrong. The next moment, as if recalling something, Callison's voice became delighted. Moreover, I've used this imagined world twice, and I've successfully taken down extremely difficult opponents. One of them was even a myth rank expert. Hearing this, I was a little speechless. Indeed, not every man would be able to remain calm when he suddenly realized that he had 2 extra pieces of meat on his chest and that his little brother had disappeared without a trace. Being distracted in a tense battle was equivalent to seeking death. However, for a powerful expert to die because he was distracted looking at his crotch, it was too embarrassing. Thinking about what would have happened if he had suddenly activated this soul world during the battle, I couldn't help but shiver. Definitely don't use this soul world. Right, also, don't tell anyone about this soul world, especially Kolos. I didn't dare to imagine what would happen if Kolos were to know about this soul world. That female elf drool? Is she of the same species as me? That's great. I have long wanted to find someone to interact with. All right, Lord, don't stare at me. I will do as you say. However, some things couldn't be avoided. What would come would come. The meeting between Callison and the gentleman still came. Furthermore, the moment they met, sparks flew. You still like adult men because you have yet to meet a Shota that you truly love. Age? That has never been a problem. A certain gray elf said. You still like females because you have yet to meet a man that you truly love. Gender? That has never been a problem. A certain Lich said. You still like humans because you have yet to meet a life that you truly love. Species? That has never been a problem. This person that everyone knew. The 3 of them shook hands, and an indescribable resonance formed between the 3 of them, forming a friendship exclusive to gentlemen. Knowing each other and understanding each other, the friendship between gentlemen came so quickly. Comrades, brothers, sisters, the Grey Elves and Lich looked at each other. While appreciating each other, they both bowed to the 3rd person at the same time. Big Brother Bayfong. Boss Draken. Yes, if there were levels to gentlemen, then Bayfong's demeanor as the unit of measurement of gentlemen shows his status as the leader of the gentlemen. We are all people who disregard illusions and face and wholeheartedly pursue the true love. There's no need to be so polite. I'm not alone. From now on, let's call each other brother and sister. Even if the world can't understand our pursuit of true love, at least we can understand each other. Little brother, little sister, what do you say? All right, I am 67 this year, so I will send second sister. I may be 235, but I am still the 3rd sister. All right, I won't comment on why there are 2 younger sisters. Also, I won't comment on how Momo, who is the oldest, is the 3rd sister. Obviously, their arrangement of becoming sworn brothers isn't based on age, but based on gentleman's level. When the 3 pairs of hands shook hands, when a certain Draken became the leader of the 3 siblings, when the 3 siblings of true love were born, the eyes of the others in the room were blinded. I can't take it anymore. My corium or dog eyes. Some people covered their eyes and rolled on the floor. Don't stop me. Let me kill her. The glory of Sulphur City's town security cannot be lost in her hands. The one who caught perverts turned into a pervert. The one who found a mummy turned into a mummy. This is too embarrassing. Some people drew their swords in anger. I can't take it anymore. Big brother, I will work hard. One day, I will also find my true love. Some people were moved by the sworn brothers in front of them, and their blood surged. If true love is an inanimate object, will it work too? Some people didn't join in due to their pride, but upon seeing this scene, they were tempted. Stop. I have had enough of these darn gentlemen. If you dare to mix with them and allow the true love siblings to proliferate, I will really make a move. Some people intended to use force to stop the spread of the Bayfong virus. Will true love be blood relatives as well? That's not right. I remember that only those within 3 generations can be considered blood relatives. We are the 1st, 2nd, 3rd generation. I have already forgotten the genealogy. Anyway, It has been many generations, and there is no obstruction at all. Hee. Some people were secretly laughing to themselves. To actually laugh foolishly for no reason, and even counting with their fingers. Looks like under Roland's influence, Renee's etiquette is completely gone. She's getting crazier and crazier. Why is she behaving like a princess of a country? Looks like I have to give her supplementary lessons when I get back. Some people were secretly worried about the princess who was getting weirder and weirder. And right now, I deeply regretted fulfilling my promise so quickly and creating a physical body for Callison, which led to the birth of the true love siblings. Yep, perhaps she should now be called Rosemary, the name he came up with. On the day that I received Desos's malicious invitation to the enthronement ceremony, I unhesitatingly started creating a physical body for Rosemary. This seemingly beautiful female body also contained my malicious intentions. Her appearance was based on Empress Victoria, who had gone through the historical verification. Amidst, it was a combination of the androgynous beauty of Kolos and many others. Coupled with her unnaturally seductive and mature curves, Rosemary's own research on female behavior was a perfect performance. It was definitely a masterpiece. Furthermore, it could be said that it was tailor-made for a certain someone's interests in women. At the very least, when Rosemary appeared, the young lads of the Dawnlawn Royal Knight Order were all stunned. The young knight of the Ottoman White Wolf Guard almost dropped the sword in his hand. Judging from the fervent gazes of the men staring at Rosemary, my craftsmanship hadn't deteriorated at all. As for myself, when you piece mud bit by bit into a doll and used meat to piece together a humanoid doll, how could you possibly have any interest in a doll? At this moment, I was sitting in the carriage and looking at the super beauty sitting opposite me. I viciously imagined Desos's panicked expression to vent my frustration at having to wear a dress again. Wait, let's stop for a moment. Seeing that it was still early, I was curious about the scenery by the roadside. Under my request, the Ottoman royal family's reception carriage slowed down. By the roadside, there was a group of poor beggars. They stared at our carriage, which bore the emblem of the Ottoman royal family. I could feel a bone-piercing hatred beneath their expressionless faces. They're just lowly commoners of the docks. Your Highness, there's nothing to see here. In this enthronement ceremony, they're the world's top singing and dancing troops and circus troops. Nodding my head thoughtfully, I pulled down the curtains of the carriage and let the carriage continue moving forward. Along the way, we had already met such refugees 4 to 5 times. Obviously, as the war of attrition between the sea folk continued, more and more refugees would appear. Perhaps the Ottoman nobles who were busy with the enthronement ceremony were just like the White Wolf Knight who had a face full of disdain, completely ignoring these unlucky people. On the other hand, the carriages which were moving in the opposite direction from us caused even more congestion. More and more citizens realized that the situation wasn't right, and there were more and more of them escaping. The commoners wouldn't care about the balance of the war. They only knew that their homes and lives were being threatened. On the other hand, the nobles and knight were busy with the so-called enthronement ceremony, completely ignoring the pleas for help from the lower echelons. Even though it was just a small matter, it was enough to show the current tense situation and the problems within Kajisi City. At the very least, the originally high popularity of the new emperor was almost gone. Without a doubt, this had shaken his foundation as a ruler. It is impossible for Desos to not see it, but he still didn't do anything. Looks like he is intending to use the enthronement ceremony as an opportunity to stake all of his cards and make a huge gamble. Making a huge gamble under the premise that he lacks sufficient understanding of the sea folk? I don't think so. Looks like it's time for us to retreat. Chapter 111. As the carriage slowly advanced on the road, there was a sudden clap of thunder in the sky. Dark clouds gathered and the sky darkened. The next moment, rain began to fall. Torrential rain in summer came and went quickly. One moment it was drizzling, and the next moment it was a torrential downpour. The raindrops clattered against the roof of the carriage, and everything outside the carriage was a blur. The dark clouds and torrential rain made the day seem like night. Even though it's only summer, it's already been raining for 3 consecutive days this week. It's been raining quite frequently recently. Huh. It seems that Dasos' luck is truly terrible. Judging from the dark clouds hanging low in the sky, it seemed that the rain wouldn't stop anytime soon. Obviously, it would directly affect the enthronement ceremony. Such a heavy rain was extremely unsuitable for large-scale ceremonies. Did they not make any preparations beforehand? The court mages aren't useless either. In this world with magic, although there were many shortcomings, certain aspects were far superior to a technological world. For example, when it came to predicting and controlling the weather, experienced hunters and rangers could predict the nearest weather from the shape of the clouds. Droll, who was close to nature, could sniff out impending natural disasters from the wind. Mages could use large-scale magic to control and choose the weather they wanted. Today, before I left, I asked Kolos about the weather. I still remembered her hesitant expression when she answered me. It should be sunny, but recently my predictions have been wrong. Even though I feel like it should be sunny for the next week, it's always raining, and I don't feel anyone else interfering. It's either my predictions are wrong, or the person interfering is far stronger than me. It would be understandable if it was someone else who made a wrong prediction, but Kolos was a drool who specialized in summoning storms. For her to make a wrong prediction would be as inconceivable as burning herself with a fire spell. On a normal day, it wouldn't matter if the weather was wrong, but since there was a group of sea folk living by the riverside, it would be a huge problem. The consecutive days of torrential rain had caused many flooded areas of the river to rise again, giving the sea folk more space to move around. On rainy days, when it was inconvenient for humans, the sea folk actually returned to their home turf, greatly increasing their combat strength. Thus, every time it rained, the guards along the coast would be on high alert. Fortunately, the sea race didn't seem to have any plans to attack during the rain. The mages of the Ottoman Empire aren't useless either. They wouldn't allow the rain to disrupt the scheduled ceremony. There's only one explanation for this. The recent rain isn't just a natural phenomenon, but the culprit behind it is far stronger than the mages of the Ottoman Empire. Such a powerful existence naturally wouldn't do something unimportant. He must have a reason for spending so much effort to change the weather. The carriage's sudden stop and change direction surprised me. Could it be that Dasos would change his plans just because it was raining? Why did it change direction? Where do we go now? Are we going back? Hearing my doubts, the White Wolf Knight leading the team hurriedly explained. Changing the route during the rain is a set procedure for the ceremony. In order to deal with the possibility of heavy rain, we have prepared two venues. One of them is an open-air plaza at the Ottoman Grand Square, while the other is at the Royal Arena. That place has already been sealed off, making it an indoor venue. If it was anyone else who heard the reply, they would probably be impressed by the Ottoman royal family's thorough preparations. However, I could hear the helplessness and weakness of a certain emperor. Without a doubt, ascending to the throne under the eyes and blessings of the citizens, followed by a celebration and performance together with the citizens, was the best choice to win the hearts of the people. Now that it was changed to an indoor venue, it could only mean that the situation had gone out of control. The road leading to the Royal Arena wasn't easy to travel on. Other than the dissatisfied faces of the citizens along the way, the horses that were rushing in from all directions were creating a constant jam. When two carriages met, the one who walked in front to give way wasn't determined by the location of the carriage, but by the rank of the guests. Obviously, the princess of a small country wasn't that high up in the hierarchy. Since I was attending the ceremony as an individual, I wasn't the ambassador of the alliance who had to arrive in advance. In the end, due to the jam and giving way, the 20-minute journey took almost an hour. By the time we finally arrived, the place was already jammed to the point where not even a drop of water could trickle through. There were no more places for carriages to park around the arena. Left with no other choice, we could only lift our skirts and walk on the muddy ground. Every time we stepped on the mud, it made me even angrier. The only thing that made me happy was the performance of the accompanying female official, Rosemary. She was indeed a rare masterpiece of mine in recent times. Other than the royal knight who kept sneaking glances at her, the young men who bumped into the wall along the way used their actions to prove Rosemary's charm. Her exquisite face was charming and gorgeous. She had an oval face and a willow waist. Her alluring curves constantly exuded the charm of a mature woman. However, those clear eyes under her phoenix eyes didn't lose any of her purity. Her short blonde hair was combed into a cute little braid. The occasional manly movements made her seem even more youthful and lively, making her look even cuter. Her contradictory beauty brought about a complicated temperament. In the eyes of the men, her temperament constantly changed as she moved and spoke. Sometimes she was a young married woman, sometimes she was an 18-year-old girl, sometimes she was young and pure, and sometimes she was seductive and luxurious. Every man could find the appearance of their dream lover. Ardenea, the true name of the goddess of beauty, was constantly repeated. In the eyes of the crowd, this extraordinary beauty wasn't on a level that ordinary people could reach. Compared to a real flower, a fake flower made of plastic was even more exquisite and perfect. As the work of my meticulous carving, Rosemary, who had the advantages of countless beauties, was definitely the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Nature's creations were the accumulation of coincidences. While coincidences could give people pleasant surprises, they would also often bring about flaws. Rosemary's perfect beauty wasn't something that ordinary people could possess. She was a combination of the best parts of countless beauties, finally achieving a harmonious and perfect creation. She was indeed a fake flower, but she was a perfect flower that could suppress all other flowers. She was the ultimate creation that natural selection couldn't produce. Speaking of this, why did I suddenly recall the plastic surgery industry of a certain country that they were so proud of? It was said that their mass-produced celebrities wouldn't debut without plastic surgery. Many celebrities didn't look like their children at all, causing many disputes. Getting back to the main topic, originally, I only wanted to make a woman that could charm Desos to take revenge on him. However, as a necromancer who was responsible for his own creations, when I wholeheartedly threw myself into creation, my world-destroying talent in creation came into play once again. The result of pursuing too much perfection was that I accidentally overdid it once again. Ardenea, I think it should be Pandora. No man would be able to reject the request of such a woman. That would be really troublesome. However, that bunch of gentlemen seemed to have completely ignored Rosemary's beauty. As expected, gentlemen's sense of beauty was different from others. In my eyes, beauties had always been trouble, and this kind of super beauty was a huge trouble. Countless myths, legends, and historical stories proved this point of view. However, I realized that I had overdone it once again, forcefully creating a perfect woman that could bring disaster to a country. Thus, I decided to leave him in the Ottoman Empire without any hesitation. Since his phylactery is in my hands, I don't have to be afraid of him playing any tricks. I'll just send him out to bring disaster to others. Desos, accept your unavoidable fate. I cursed viciously with resentment. Then, with tears in my eyes, I looked at the new achievement that I received before I left. Mommy, why is this brother wearing a skirt? Don't look. Hurry up and leave. When a system notification popped up this time, that simulated child's voice almost scared me to the point that my heart nearly stopped. I thought that I had really been exposed. Ding! Congratulations on appearing in public while wearing female clothing for the third time. You have received the hidden achievement, Man in a Skirt. You have been given the honorary title, Head of the Men's Club. After equipping this title, all creatures that look like females, including traps, tomboys, transvestites, and other creatures of unknown gender, will have their friendliness towards you greatly increase. Their wariness towards you will also be lowered, and the possibility of love will be greatly reduced. This title is automatically bound to the King of Gentlemen title, and it will be activated at the same time. He isn't bad. I feel that I can tell him anything, and he is really suitable as a sister and a close friend. However, as a love partner, it feels a little weird. I probably don't see him as a man. System notice, I didn't expect you to discover such a hidden achievement. As expected of the great King of Gentlemen. Repeat after me, it isn't wrong to wear female clothing, but it is wrong to not be beautiful enough when wearing female clothing. I am the great king of female clothing, Lord St. Roland. Oh yeah, actually, I'm already numb to gentlemanly things to the point that I'm a little indifferent to them. However, that the possibility of love being born is greatly reduced is an actual curse of misfortune. It makes this former veteran member who has died a super long-distance relationship where having a girlfriend is equivalent to not having a girlfriend feel the urge to squat in a corner and draw circles. Ding! Let me add one more thing. Abnormal people, gentlemen, will ignore this side effect. So, enjoy the sincere feelings between gentlemen to your heart's content. Right, if you don't want to be dismembered, and for the sake of world peace, please be careful not to be caught in the act of adultery by the demon queen who is getting sicker and sicker. Unrelated to world peace? Who knows? She might descend in her true form in a fit of rage. If that happens, there will definitely be a god war, and a world war will break out. You still dare to say that your love life has nothing to do with world peace? Lord Yongya? Rosemary's soft question jolts me out of my reverie. Even though the royal attendant beside me is staring at me in a daze for a long time, he still maintains his smile and etiquette. Lord, His Majesty invites you to the VIP lounge for a discussion. What was meant to come still came. I don't think that Desos invited me here just to observe the ceremony. Under the attendant's guidance, I soon arrived at the VIP lounge. Today's main character, who is adorned with countless decorations and looks like a Christmas tree, His Majesty, Emperor Desos I of the Ottoman Empire. This is Rosemary, my maid. My malicious introduction, Rosemary's flirtatious gesture of lifting her skirt and her perfect smile didn't receive the response he deserved. After perfunctorily nodding his head, that bastard still glared at me. You are still as beautiful as ever. I trust that you have been well since we last met. I miss you so much. All right then, that one sentence caused me to have the urge to draw my sword and kill him. From a certain standpoint, this is another type of ability. To be honest, my current appearance is exactly the same as Renee's. The young Renee is obviously late in puberty, which is why there is room for me, who has reverted back to my boyish stage, to impersonate her. With such an appearance and an aircraft-like body that doesn't have any curves to speak of, it would be a stretch to say that she is cute. But to say that she is beautiful is either a lie to make people happy, or the person who said it is truly blind. This bastard can't be a Gala Khan, right? Behind me, Rosemary immediately bursts into laughter upon hearing my nephew's praise. Although she hurriedly covers her mouth, it's probably too late. A maid being so rude is the equivalent of His Majesty the Emperor being laughed at. Desos, who has been quite angry recently, instinctively reaches for his sword. But when he sees me blocking in front of the maid and frowning in dissatisfaction, he hurriedly adds, I'm talking about this aura of a conqueror, not your figure. Actually, your figure is quite good considering your age. Desos' voice gets softer and softer as he uses his actions to hide what he meant by death. However, since I am not a female, I am actually slightly happy that he says that I don't have a figure, but what kind of figure does a man have? Did something go wrong somewhere? Was it wrong from the very start? I can only keep my angry roar in my heart. After a while, I suppressed my anger and asked, Why are you looking for me? You should be very busy right now, so just say it. Your Highness Roland, are you willing to become the Empress of the Ottoman Empire? I won't interfere with your private life after marriage. If you are willing to merge the two countries, I will give the Donglan Principality the highest level of autonomy, allowing it to become the wealthiest and most peaceful region in the Ottoman Empire. I refuse. I squeeze these words out from the gaps of my teeth. I am filled with anger, but I can't do anything about it. It really makes me feel sullen. I am seriously considering if I should find a priest of the god of fate to change my luck, even if there is an 80% chance that they are using the name of the god of fate to scam money. I know that you are worried that the Ottoman Empire will take this opportunity to swallow up the Donglan Principality. How about this? You can temporarily entrust the royal power to someone trustworthy and wait for our second child to be born. Enough. There is a limit to my patience, so stop insulting me." My angry roar caused Dasos to swallow back the rest of his words. Looking at my angry face, he finally shakes his head and asks for help. "Hermit, it is as you said. I can't convince her at all." "Then you go." "I already said, your way of coaxing a little girl is fine, but it is meaningless to a true ruler. Your Highness, since you can't convince me, let's get straight to the point and talk about a deal." Hermit understands my temperament very well, so he didn't waste any words and directly brought up the deal and conditions. It turns out that due to the changes in the situation and the signing of the secret contract, the Ottoman royal family has changed their original goal. That marriage proposal wasn't as simple as it seemed. In their eyes, this wasn't a method to swallow up the Donglan Principality, but a kind of bribe, a bribe aimed at the princess. As long as you're willing to become the Ottoman Empress, you will become the second most powerful person after His Majesty the Emperor. You can touch the women in the harem as you please, as long as you have 2 children of the Ottoman royal bloodline. Dasos himself isn't a person who likes women, so you don't have to worry about him using force. Rather than saying that you are husband and wife, you are more like collaborators. Children, I was so angry that I started laughing, but the other party took it as a sign of loosening up and increased his persuasion. Military power, wealth, beauties, land, as long as you want it, we will be able to satisfy you. Why do you need to focus on some small border country? Agree to this condition, and the entire Ottoman Principality will be yours. Our future is the entire world. As long as you help us, we will conquer everything. Why me? What ability does a princess from the countryside have? At this point, I was so angry that I started laughing. This time, the one who replied was Dasos himself. Don't belittle yourself. Who would dare to look down on the twin stars of the Mist bloodline? Besides, just the talent of the tyrant and the bloodline of the angel that can unlock the Scarlet Conqueror to the final stage is worth us betting on. What does a Donglan amount to? This continent is so vast, waiting for us to discover and conquer it. Furthermore, don't say that I am a little unreliable, but my instincts tell me that if we want to conquer this continent, you are absolutely indispensable. Your true potential and abilities are definitely not as much as what you have shown. All right, these are all excuses, reasons to convince myself. I have taken a liking to you, and I feel that you are the most suitable empress for me. Marry me. Together, with the entire Ottoman Empire as our foundation, we will conquer the entire world and bring an order that belongs to us to He. Without a doubt, this is a kind of bribe. If the one staying here was really the princess of a small country, rather than returning to her impoverished country and fighting for the fate of her country in a land of ice, becoming the empress of a large country is undoubtedly a much better choice. Furthermore, if the one he is trying to convince is a 14-year-old girl, the chances of success are even higher. However, he was wrong from the start. This is definitely not on my list of choices. Lord, can I laugh? I really can't take it anymore. Rosemary, who is disguised as a maid, has a calm expression on her face, but for my phylactery, she's trying to stifle her laughter. Hold it in. Should I say that as expected of the legendary king of winter wolves? This bizarre intuition of his really saw through part of my disguise. However, the problem is that he was ridiculously wrong from the start. I still refuse. If I want something, I will take it myself. I don't even want to consider this foolish marriage alliance. Furthermore, your marriage proposal today is a mistake. In the future, you might regret it. Dasos, will never regret it. All right, this time, it is my turn to try my best to stifle my laughter. The last time, the one who said never regret it was the old Lion King. However, his ending wasn't good. I reckon that he probably regretted it in the end. As for Dasos, no matter how I look at it, it is a tragedy. Thinking about this, my mood suddenly becomes better, and I smile playfully. I look forward to that day. Who knows, 10 years after the secret agreement expires, there might be a day where we fight. Dasos finally knew that his bribe plan and proposal had completely failed. After letting out a sigh, he pretended to be relaxed and shrugged. Just as he was about to say something, the door of the VIP room was opened. Who is it? Didn't I say that no one is allowed to enter? The angry roar of the emperor causes the person who enters to tremble. However, recalling the intelligence that he just received, the royal attendant hurries to the emperor's ear and whispers something to him. Even though he is whispering, my ears have always been sharp since I'm not too far away from him. The flood suddenly rose again. The sea folk have come ashore, and the defensive line along the river has been breached. Lord Basra and the nine-headed dragon have suddenly started fighting. Before the ceremony even started, the situation in Kajisi City, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, has gone out of control. The war has already broken out. Chapter 112, AD 1897, the summer of the year of the Griffin, was destined to be remembered by many. No matter if it was the start of the eternal holy war, the start of the sea folks' rise to the stage of history, or the birth of the city of rain, Falohi, it was remembered by the later generations. After all, there were too many major events that happened in this year. From the start, everyone, including me, underestimated the sea folk, and even more so, underestimated the Lady Storm and the water elemental god behind them. The most important thing to make an accurate judgment was to obtain comprehensive and accurate information. However, the people on the surface had too little understanding of the sea folk. At the start of the sea folks' invasion, even the most brilliant strategist could only make a conservative judgment based on past experience and history. It should only be a small-scale war. Or perhaps, it can't even be called a war. It should just be an attack on the coastal cities. After all, they can't even go ashore, nor can they occupy our land. Could it be that killing all the creatures on the surface would be considered a victory? This kind of war is meaningless. As long as the sea folk are intelligent creatures, as long as our living space can't overlap, they can't go ashore, and we can't enter the water, then an all-out war between us is meaningless and impossible to happen. Wars between countries and races are usually for the sake of benefits. No matter if it's a fight for living space, land and resources, or just for the grudges of the leaders, the hearts of the people, or the long-cherished wishes of the military, war can break out. However, if the war is destined to not have enough benefits, or if the cost is obviously greater than the return, then the possibility of such a meaningless war breaking out is so low that it can be ignored. The sea folk can't stay on the surface for long. They are just cannon fodder forced to go ashore by the evil god Lady Storm. As long as the war drags on, they will retreat sooner or later. In this world, even the decisions of the gods can't be absolute. The gods are high above and accept the beliefs of the various races. They also protect their believers according to their divine domain and divine concept. However, if they force everyone to throw themselves into a war where they are 100% certain to die but are destined to get nothing out of it, then perhaps it would be good if they just disobeyed the gods on the surface. It's even possible for them to abandon the gods' beliefs and find a new god. After all, this was not an absolute world completely ruled by a monotheistic religion. Many gods were originally mortals, and the distance between gods and mortals was not that far. Gods needed the faith and support of mortals, and the weak mortal races also needed the protection of gods. This was also the main reason why the Ottoman Empire would make such a passive and delaying decision. Even the royal strategists patted their chests and used their lives to guarantee that the sea folks' attack was strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. It was only the beginning of the Holy War, as the strategists repeatedly emphasized that the sea folk were not ambitious enough and that they were actually wary of the evil gods of chaos that forced them to come ashore. Most of the Ottoman Empire's higher-ups ignored the threat before them. Instead, they were still ambitious enough to invest their energy into scheming against their own people, vassal states. However, in reality, due to a portion of the sea tribe being able to go ashore and almost none of the surface tribe being able to enter the water, the intelligence of both parties is not equal. Furthermore, Tracy, who has left the sea region for several months, does not know that due to the revival of the water elemental god, the entire sea tribe world has undergone an earth-shattering change. This might have to be explained from the living environment of the sea race. In reality, even though the sea is incomparably vast, with seemingly endless resources and living space, Even though the combat strength of the sea folk is not low, the life of the sea folk is actually much more miserable than that of the surface tribe. The deep sea is extremely dangerous, not to mention the fatal low temperature and water pressure. Those inestimable giant sea monsters are the true rulers of the sea. Being only able to make a living in the shallow sea of the continental shelf, the space that the sea folk can live in is really limited. Furthermore, the limited space they have to live in has caused them to face a very real problem. Food is always insufficient. There are countless schools of fish in the sea. However, in reality, it is extremely unreliable to rely on the heavens to make a living. There are indeed many schools of fish, but most of them have owners. Previously, it was mentioned that one cannot go to the deep sea. However, in reality, the fishing resources in the shallow sea are extremely limited. Furthermore, after the farming industry in the sea turned into a joke and relying solely on hunting to sustain their daily lives, the sea folk, in order to maintain sufficient fishing resources in the surroundings of their residence, turned to herding fishes as their only choice. Thus, herding fishes has a long tradition. The fishing resources determine the number of members of the sea folk. The number and strength of the sea folk determines the size of the territory they can occupy to provide for the growth of their own fishes. Herbivorous fishes chase after seaweed and seaweed, while carnivorous fishes chase after other fishes. Just like herding on the surface, artificial herding underwater would still cause the natural balance of the area to be destroyed. When a negative growth of the fishes appears, migration is unavoidable. The fishes and the sea folk would consume the basic resources of that area. The larger the tribe, the shorter the migration period. In a sense, they were like the centaurs, a nomadic tribe. The only difference was that the centaurs herded cattle and sheep and chased after aquatic plants, while the sea folk herded fish and chased after the tides. The songs and talents of the sirens and mermaids to summon fishes seem extremely magical. However, they are only tools for herding fishes. There is not much difference from the flutes and whistles of shepherds. Only their own fishes and ocean companions will respond to their summons. Herding fishes sounds fantastical and beautiful. However, in reality, it is a hard job. Chasing the tides and seaweed requires a lot of experience. Furthermore, the dangers of migration are even greater. No one knows if they will encounter sea monsters or hostile tribes at the next migration point. If they are unlucky and suffer heavy losses after several migrations, it will be time for the tribe to disband. On the other hand, the nomadic tribes are naturally aggressive, causing many tribes to work as mercenaries or even bandits themselves. However, on the other hand, the nomadic way of survival is destined to prevent the birth of a relatively centralized feudal country. This is because once the number of people in a tribe reaches a certain level, in order to fight for living space and limited resources, the tribe will definitely disband. If there is no capital, there is no limit to the size of the territory. How can a feudal country based on land and fiefment be born? The few large and medium-sized gathering points in the shallow sea that are rich in resources all have a limit on the number of resident tribes. Every once in a while, they have to rotate. Only the strongest tribe can obtain a relatively comfortable life after winning the tribal competition. No one can guarantee that they will not meet with an unstoppable disaster the next time they migrate. A relatively stable and settled life is the desire of the sea folk from the bottom of their hearts. It is also the root cause of their jealousy and even hatred towards the tribes on the surface. Why do those weak and timid creatures on the surface have a happy and stable daily life, while we don't even know where we will be tomorrow? Speaking of this, since there must be benefits and reasons for a war, to make the extremely realistic sea folk fight to the death as cannon fodder, the benefits offered by the water elemental goddess Alos and Lady Storm are very obvious. A capital, a stepping stone to the new world, a holy land in the eyes of all the sea folk. And after the capital is confirmed, it will be a kingdom that belongs to the sea folk. It is true that the sea folk cannot live without water and are unable to go ashore for a long period of time. However, if the land is constantly raining and there is always a few meters of water on the ground, then the sea folk will be able to live freely in the water city. They only need to reserve a part of the dry land outside the city as farmland and enslave the tribes on the surface as farmers. Then, there's the possibility of the birth of a kingdom that belongs to the sea folk. Is it inconceivable? However, in this world of magic and true gods, everything is possible. Storms and thunderstorms are the divine concepts of the sea folk's goddess of protection, Lady Storm. Furthermore, the water elemental goddess Alos is a super expert in playing with water. Only they can build a rain city that circulates automatically. In the original history, the revived ancient elemental gods are the first batch of world bosses. Each of them is an existence close to that of a true god, which is obviously beyond the ability of the players to deal with. Thus, the omnipotent game manager arranged a series of plot killings, causing these unlucky people who just woke up to die tragically in the hands of the natives and the heroes chosen by fate, making their subordinate elemental creatures become the heroes to practice their skills. There is still a difference between the real world and the simulated virtual game. In this world, there is no super god named Game Manager. If those noobs who are only a few or 10 levels really meet the weak, ancient elemental gods that just revive, they might not be able to kill the god to prove their Tao, but rather they will have to offer their bodies and souls as tonics. Thus, other than the unlucky fire elemental god, the other released elemental gods have already begun to recover from their long hibernation period. How can they, who were once all-powerful, be willing to be forgotten by others? It's fine if they don't make a move, but if they make a move, it will definitely change everything. Some of the plots in the walkthrough were wrong from the very beginning. History and fate were off track from the very start, before the huge benefits of completely changing the fates of themselves and their descendants. The sea folks' attack is no longer a small skirmish like in the history. It is an all-out war, a war of annihilation and invasion. The Ottoman Empire, who has neglected the determination and strength of the other party, is still dreaming of becoming a super empire, completely unaware that the disaster is already at its doorstep. At this moment, a grand ceremony is being held on the surface. Actually, a ceremony is also being held underwater, and the scale is even grander. Somewhere at the bottom of the river in Kajisi City, under the cover of a magical mist, it is a bustling scene. Hundreds of elites from the Seafolk tribe are serving as guards without any complaints. Countless powerful Seafolk have gathered here. The arrogant and rude Naga royalty is smiling modestly. The violent and ferocious sea beasts are wearing headgear that prevents them from speaking and chains that restrict their movements. Even the arrogant and bloodthirsty sea giants have put down their rusted anchors that they always carry with them and are trying their best to lower their heads and pretend to be humble. Only an even more powerful and supreme existence can make these powerful beings lower their heads. On top of a huge altar carved from colorful coral, there are two thrones, one big and one small, carved with fine jade. The small one is empty, while the other one has an ice beauty with snow-white skin sitting on it. Her form is half human and half fish. Her upper body is human, but she has a long tail like a sea dragon. Although she appeared petite and beautiful compared to the gigantic altar, she was still taller than even the sturdiest sea giant. She appeared far more luxurious and beautiful than the mermaids of the sea tribe's royal family. And if one looked closely, this beautiful woman with scales and a tail had translucent skin. She really was made of water. Let's begin. The water elemental goddess Alos's voice is clear and cold, but there is an indescribable sense of weakness in it. Her voice isn't loud, but it echoes in the ears of all the sea folk. This isn't magic. It is merely the will of the river water conveying the will of their ruler. This is underwater, her world. She has endless authority and unparalleled power. As Alos' will is conveyed, the ceremony officially begins. With a tap of Alos's white, jade-like finger, a door to the void opens. On the other side is the water elemental plane. That is the home of Alos, as well as her kingdom. Countless water elementals rush out. The moment they step onto the altar, they shake and transform into pure water. The coral altar, which is nourished by the water, starts glowing. Middle-sized water elementals, water elemental warlords, water elemental elders, ancient water elementals. One powerful existence after another voluntarily turns into offerings. Elemental creatures never fear death. To them, death is only a way to return to their own world. On the other side, the black-robed sea folk walked up the altar one by one. They were the priests of the Queen of the Storms, and they were able to summon storms and raise waves to engulf ships. They had always had a high status and prestige in the various tribes. At this moment, despite their high status, they're only doing the same thing. Walking up the altar, picking up a ritual dagger, stabbing it into their own hearts, and falling down in satisfaction. As these respected storm priests fall down one by one, there's already a shadow on the empty throne. She is only the size of a normal person and is far from being as tall as Alos. However, any sea folk who sees her will definitely tremble and lower their proud heads. As a chaos malevolent god, although she is not well known on the surface, just like her malevolent god colleagues, Lady Storm is also happy to receive the blood sacrifices of her believers. Her will has long descended. Your souls shall enter my God's realm. Your deeds shall be sung by the future generations. The god's clone speaks in a praising tone, causing more black-robed priests to quickly walk up the altar to fight for the chance to sacrifice themselves before the true god. As the sacrifices fall down one by one, the shadow of Lady Storm becomes more and more real. Following the descent of the true god's clone, a powerful storm and thunder appear in the sky above the river. Similar to Alos, the green-skinned queen of storms also had the traits of a sea tribe in terms of appearance and physique. When she slowly materialized, the impatient goddess of storms couldn't wait to start the calamity of the surface creatures. Kajisi City? From now on, only the capital of the sea folk, the city of rain, Falohi. My people, use your own hands to seize the kingdom of your dreams. The will of the god is conveyed in the storm. The next moment, the dignified, true god clone actually picks up a ritual dagger and stabs it into his own heart. When the will of the clone returns to the main body, it has already turned into a tornado in the midst of the black storm god power. The self-sacrifice of the true god of storm clone will probably cause the strength of the main body to regress by a large margin. However, such a huge gift given right after the start of the Holy War is destined to give the Order gods a headache. At this moment, the top of the tornado has reached the clouds. A new natural cycle is already being constructed. The will of the water elemental god has already been passed down. I bestow the name of the city of rain, Falohi. Within the boundaries of this city, the rain will never stop. A blade will always accompany the waves. The people of the rain will become the kin of the water. In front of the endless storm, in front of the mighty power of the true God, the boundary between the water and the sky is broken. Countless waves are swept up into the sky to form new rain. A new natural cycle has already been formed. The strange thing is that the flood of the entire city is rising, but the flood of the submerged pier is receding. Very quickly, when all the flood is maintained at around a blade, about 1 meter, the rainstorm is much smaller. With the help of the water elemental Grand Duke, the pale Alos returns to the water elemental plane through the space gate. She, who has overexerted herself, is destined to go into hibernation again. According to the will of the Queen of Storms, go and take back our city. The silent blue sea dragon floats to the surface of the water. The sea giants pick up their heavy anchors. Naga begins to prepare their spells. It has finally begun. On the river, the nine-headed dragon Emperor Hydra, who has been holding back for a long time, steps into the city for the first time, causing the entire city to start trembling. The sudden rise of the flood destroys the barrier. The rainwater and the waist-high flood makes people's vision blurry and unable to move. The Ottoman defenders, who are at a loss due to the strange weather and flood, are about to face the toughest water battle in history. Evil dragon, die. Silver lightning streaks across the sky. The dragon head closest to the nine-headed dragon is actually split open. Green dragon blood spurts out, tainting the surface of the river with a foul stench and poison. Ah! Damn butcher! While the mortals are retreating in the face of the aggressive sea folk, the first to declare war is the Valkyrie Basra. Chapter 113. The torrential rain and thunder outside the window could no longer be regarded as the background. Along with the flood came the wrath of the ocean. Humans had occupied the most fertile land for far too long. As the victors of the last holy war, they had a reason to be proud. The sea folk were chased into the pitch-black, cold ocean. The beastmen lost their grasslands and plains. The undead hid in the swamps and deserts. Even the kingdom of the elves, which was also the law of order, could only shut up its citizens and live in peace in a corner of the world when faced with the overbearing human kingdom. The losers of the previous holy war and their god of protection had suffered in agony for more than 1,700 years. The long-lived ones who were fortunate enough to survive could still remember how their families and homes were destroyed in the war. They hated and feared war, but also longed for war. They hated the destructive war that took everything away, but they also hoped to return to the homeland that their ancestors had lost. They wanted to vent their hatred and anger in a war of vengeance and reclaim everything that they had lost. The short-lived humans had long since viewed themselves as the core of the world, the beloved of Aichi, the king of all living things. The origin of the beastmen, the holy land of Bainlia, the great plains of Bainlia, the fertile black soil of today is said to be able to grow seedlings even if rice is sown, but it is one of the less important parts of the endless territory of the San Antonio Empire. The original owners of the beastmen were either killing each other in the underground world or searching for food in the wastelands. Back when the sea tribe was still just an aquatic tribe, they could be found in rivers, lakes, and seas. But now, if the sea tribe appeared in the inland lakes, it was likely that armies would immediately come to annihilate them, and adventurers would come to claim their rewards. The kingdom of the elves, which was supposed to be an ally of the elves, would always be able to find their own kind in the slave market. The border conflicts between the elves and the human kingdoms had never stopped. The once brave knight class had now become the lore knight class. Humans' overly comfortable and relaxed lives compared to other species had given rise to an inexplicable arrogance and pride. As short-lived species, their short-sightedness and forgetfulness made them forget the glory and struggle of their ancestors. They felt that they were the spirit of all creatures, and that all other lives should be their subordinates. Orcs? Weren't they just a bunch of barbarians who couldn't even speak clearly? In the face of our new technology and war machines, these barbarians are nothing. Elves? They're just a bunch of stupid antiques. If there really is a holy war, just 2 of our human super kingdoms would be enough to sweep through all 4 sides. Perhaps we'll become the easiest holy war's victors. The victors of the last holy war were proud of their strength and devoted themselves to scheming against their own kind. The losers, on the other hand, were suffering in agony, waiting patiently for a chance to make a comeback. The 2 sides had completely different battle preparation attitudes, causing the originally victorious order to unknowingly fall into an absolute disadvantage. In the northern wastelands, the earth elemental god and the beastmen came together. On a cold night, relying on bonfires to keep warm, the tribe leaders pointed at their dream homeland on the map and loudly roared and cried. The beastmen warriors swore a blood oath and prepared for the journey. On the barren island in the south, the black-winged people, who had already become a pirate species, regained the right to fly with the help of the wind elemental god. They activated the ancient floating island, picked up their divine spears, and began a new hunting season. If it wasn't for the fire elemental god that Eliza had eaten as a tonic, the 4 ancient elemental gods would have all been mobilized. The elemental tide would rise wildly throughout the entire plane. Magic, abilities, divine arts, and other supernatural abilities would become much easier to learn. As the origin of elemental magic, the 4 main elemental magic would have an exponential increase in power. At the same time, it would become easier and more frequent to receive visitors from other planes. The elemental gods would become a permanent resident of the main plane. The Chaos faction's demon army had already begun the latest round of bloody elimination competition. The new army leader would obtain the opportunity to bring demons to harvest the souls of the surface. Perhaps this was only the prelude to the eternal holy war. But if they couldn't even survive the prelude, it wouldn't be wrong to say that it was the final battle. As for the Order faction, other than the humans, the second main force should be the elves, who had already split into countless kingdoms, tribes, and tribes. However, more than 100 years ago, the kingdom of the elves had already begun to close off their countries. The long-lived species and the elven gods, who were getting weaker and weaker, had no intention of informing their allies, even if they received the warning of the Holy War. After all, they knew that even if they did inform the humans, they would most likely be ignored and mocked by the arrogant humans. You could praise the elves for their beauty, kindness, and intelligence, but never praise them for their magnanimity. That was because in the elven language, forgiveness and forgetfulness were synonymous. For those narrow-minded elves with long ears, thousands of years of accumulated grudges seemed to have happened just yesterday. They had long since decided to stay out of trouble, so it was already good enough that they didn't kick them when they were down. Furthermore, there were rumors that the elven gods had always been in cahoots with the Chaos evil gods. It was difficult to ascertain whether the rumors were true or not. However, it was a publicly acknowledged fact that the relationship between the elven gods and the human gods was extremely poor. After all, there would always be some indescribable estrangement between a leader who was past his prime and a leader who was still in power. It was just like watching a popular celebrity from yesterday. Even if they didn't show it on the surface, they would definitely feel all sorts of emotions in their hearts. All right, getting back to the main topic, the current situation was already laid out before us. The Chaos faction had been sharpening their blades for 1,000 years, while the human empire was still in the midst of internal strife, in the midst of peace and prosperity. As long as war were to break out, the outcome of the early stages would already be decided. Looking at the conclusion after that, I personally made the same mistake as the Celestial Tower. They relied too much on prophecy magic, while I relied too much on the so-called historical prophecy. Even if that history was a simulation of reality and the earlier part of history was accurate, it didn't mean that the later part would be accurate as well. Other than the butterfly effect that I had on myself, just the fact that there were no other players in the real world meant that everything was destined to be different. In the real world, where there were no players blessed by the heavens, it was impossible for the 3 elemental gods to be killed by a random plot. The level of the elemental calamity had far exceeded my expectations. Perhaps, in the entire holy war in the continent, this could only be considered as an appetizer. However, this war was destined to be even more tragic than the one in the history. All right, even if I really predicted it, even if I didn't stay in Sulphur Mountain City's prison and sharpen my law skills, I would still be helpless in such an important matter that involved countless powerful gods. The current reality was already the complete opposite of the history. In that history, the 4 elemental gods were destroyed and 3 of them were sealed. The only fire elemental god managed to escape from the underground world and mix together with the Underground Alliance army that released him, causing the friction between the underground world and the surface world to intensify. In the real world, due to my influence, the originally troublesome fire elemental god was completely eliminated. The other 3 elemental gods found their own helpers and became the new super troublesome ones. Debating on which history was better was meaningless and worthless. History doesn't have hypotheses, nor does it believe in ifs. There was no possibility of a winner or loser. At this moment, I had to face the storm stirred up by the wings of the butterfly of fate, the huge wave that was stirred up by the water elemental god. Coming out from the VIP lounge, even I, who had experienced countless wars, was shocked by the sight before me. Outside the window was a tornado that covered the sky. It was as though a giant dragon was sucking up water into the sky. The dark clouds maintained a relatively even rainfall, turning the entire city into a city of rain. A miracle. This wasn't a description. It was a judgment based on the current situation. Only divine power could create such a strange phenomenon. Inside the room, the hall on the first floor was in a mess. The flood had already spread into the room. On a temporary platform, the major nobles were urgently contacting their advisors. The moment Desos walked down, he was surrounded by messengers. Countless mystical light flashed and disappeared. The precious high-level mages became the only reliable messengers. The coastal defense line has been broken through. There are too many sea folk. Those sea giants are impossible to defend against. Court Archmage Anso died in battle. The court mages are beginning to retreat. The White Wolf Guards are being surrounded by the sea folk. It's impossible to break through. The road to support has been blocked by refugees. The private soldiers of the nobles are already killing people to clear the way. Bad news fell like snowflakes, but the most worrying thing was the images sent back by the mage eyes set up on every street. In one scene, the White Wolf Cavalry, the pride of the Ottoman Empire, were surrounded by short murlocs. Their well-bred warhorses could not move an inch in the flood, and the cavalry, who were forced to dismount, had no choice but to remove the micellar mithril alloy that they were so proud of in order to move in the flood. In the water, the fearless charge that they were so proud of was impossible to carry out. The indestructible violent heavy sword was unable to find a target to attack. It was impossible to throw the explosive javelins in the heavy rain. The dripping White Wolf Guard was unable to catch up to the murlocs swimming in the water. Their heavy armor and weapons became their greatest burden. The powerful White Wolf Guard was fighting a chaotic battle in the flood. Their performance was even worse than a fisherman's. Even though the sound transmitted from the image was very soft, the knight's expression of extreme pain, the blood that appeared on his body, and the sudden appearance of a harpoon on his back explained everything. "Oh la 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 la!" Merrily shrieking, the merman popped his head up from the water, but then he lowered his head and dove back into the water, searching for the next chance to attack. The short stature of the murlocs, which was ridiculed by other races in the past, became the best weapon in this flood. The muddy river water made it impossible for the knight to discover the murlocs underwater. On the other side, a sturdy knight was caught in a fishing net and dragged to the ground. Relying on his strong physique and heavy armor, he was entangled in the fishing net and couldn't get up at all. He tore the net with all his might, but he still couldn't open his eyes. In the end, he could only open his eyes wide and strangle his own neck. Just like that, he was drowned to death in the eyes of everyone. That's little Mickey, the youngest Silver Knight of the Guards. His ability to control his steed in charge was the best in the 7th platoon, but he died just like that in the hands of a low-level murloc. Hauke, the strongest knight of the 7th squad, was drowned. "My lord, please think of something. At the very least, we can't let everyone die such a worthless death." The angry roar of the White Wolf Knight in the hall made everyone feel inexplicably sad. One of the virtues of a knight was to not fear sacrifice, but at the same time, there was also a rule that said sacrifice must be worthwhile. If one died while charging toward the giant dragon, it would naturally be a kind of honor. However, if one died in the hands of a weak murloc that they looked down on in the past, it would be an insult to a knight. If the powerful White Wolf Guard was already so tragic, then the Ottoman people in the other scenes were even more tragic. A beautiful mermaid was jumping underwater. The pouring rain reminded her of the water curtain waterfall in her hometown. Thus, she caressed a magic shell between her golden hair and sang a song. The mermaid's singing voice was world famous. The beautiful figure in the shell swimsuit was even more charming. However, the warriors present didn't have the mood to appreciate it. That was because along with the Song of Tides, there was a deadly lurker. Piranhas. There are piranhas under the water. The warrior who screamed in pain immediately fell to the ground. After a few seconds, white bones filled with teeth marks floated to the surface of the blood. Jellyfish, poisonous jellyfish. Everyone, get out of the water. The almost transparent and colorless jellyfish in the water were impossible to detect. Even the strongest warrior would be paralyzed to death unknowingly after being touched by those poisonous tentacles that were filled with deadly venom. Ah! Swordfish. This warrior was lucky. At the very least, he knew who killed him. The long mouth of the swordfish pierced into his stomach. He didn't even struggle for a few seconds before he fell to the ground and died. Along with the mermaids singing, the seafood delicacies in the restaurant became a deadly hunter. Everyone knew that staying in the water was equivalent to seeking death. However, under the blessing of the two gods' divine power for Rain City, every place in the city was submerged in water. The warriors had nowhere to retreat to. Although there were people who abandoned everything and climbed onto the roofs, judging from the fins of the sharks underwater, it was the same as being trapped in a dangerous place where they couldn't move. What awaited them was still the end of the world. A large number of sea folk entered the city. If the battle between the middle and low-level warriors caused people to sigh helplessly, then the battle between the high-level warriors caused people to despair. Exploding flames come. A battle mage who specialized in fire summoned the flames he was most proficient in despair. However, before the flames could take shape, a young Naga clapped her hands together and extinguished the flames. As the incarnation of a water snake spirit, every Naga more or less knew some water magic. Perhaps on land, she would only be able to quench thirst. However, the waves she created in the water were deadly. Furthermore, she was only an apprentice. The water god and sea god's blessing greatly increased the sea folk's combat strength. The shockwaves created by the sea giants could easily destroy even the sturdiest of fortresses. The sea folk archmages with evil smiles only needed to hide in the water and repeatedly summon huge waves to wash away everything. Furthermore, the elite warriors from several hundred tribes had arrived today. The human warriors were surrounded and killed by the flood. In terms of a number of high-level warriors, the humans didn't have the advantage. Never fight against the sea folk in the water, unless you also have fins and don't need to breathe. It was unknown who said this ancient advice first, but there was only a deathly silence in the hall. What followed after was the faint sound of sobbing. That's right, no one could defeat the sea folk in the water. Just like how I almost died in the fishing nets of a group of fishmen a few days ago. The combat strength of the sea folk in the water was immeasurable. This was also the reason why the two gods went to rest after completing the blessing of Rain City. They believed that there was no need for them to interfere anymore. The development of the situation proved their judgment right. From a moment this city became the home ground of the sea folk, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The Ottoman Empire was destined to lose its most luxurious city, the Pearl City. No one expected that on this joyous day for the Ottoman Empire, the powerful empire would meet with such a calamity. Everyone turned their gazes to Dasos, waiting for his decision. A city wasn't everything to an empire. A vast territory could still form new armies. As long as the people were alive, there would still be hope. The day of vengeance would eventually arrive. Meaningless sacrifices were meaningless. Everyone could see and think about what needed to be done right now. However, the cruel decision would be carried out by the emperor who ascended to the throne today. Abandon the defensive line. Those who can walk, retreat. Leave the city. Shouting these words through gritted teeth, Dasos seemed to have aged 10 years. No, my parents are still at home. Your Majesty, please save them. The cry of alarm from the nobles was only the beginning. My boys are still resisting. How can we give up? This is the most despicable betrayal. The old general roared at the king. His soldiers were dying tragically one by one. Once the retreat began, all of them would become cannon fodder. There was no possibility of survival. Kajisi is the capital. If we lose the capital, what face do we have left to stand on the H continent? We will become the laughingstock of the entire world. The old marquis smiled bitterly. What he said was indeed the truth. The only ones who were smiling in the hall were the small countries that were forced to be subordinate. Even though the envoys were worried about their own safety, they still looked happy. For real diplomats, even if they died, as long as they didn't sign on the humiliating treaty and their descendants wouldn't be shamed for 100 years, it was worth it even if they died on the spot. I said, give up. The scarlet demon sword emitted a blood-like brilliance. The king who held the sword stabbed it into the ground. Stay in this city and wait for death. Stupid. So what if we lose the white wolf guards? We could just rebuild the white lion guards and white tiger guards. So what if we lose the old capital? Our great Ottoman territory is vast. There are countless cities that are close to Kajisi. We could just choose again. We have indeed lost today. We will remember this hatred. Tomorrow, my army will take back everything. I said retreat. Take away the important things and throw away the useless belongings. Take away all the national treasures. Technical information is prioritized. Children, women, and the elderly are prioritized. Special talents are prioritized. Young men with 4 limbs, pick up your weapons and stand with me. My knight, and I will stay until the very last moment. After his anger reached its peak, the Winter Wolf King's tone became abnormally calm. However, his trembling whiskers showed that he was still in a state of rage. The Emperor's calmness and initiative to bring up the rear stabilized the situation at the critical moment. He didn't hesitate to cut his losses and no doubt avoided the most tragic ending. As for me, it was time for me to make a decision. I'm sorry. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. You can leave with the first batch of women. No, I should say, please leave with them. Green Wild Bay's Goblin Bank. If you complete the requirements of the contract, you can receive the key there. However, it will have to be at least a month later. I didn't answer the question and didn't speak a single word of truth. I was making the final preparations before leaving, so how could I tell the other party that the key was on me? Leave just like that? Impossible. Little Rene is currently following my request to invite talent from all over. Kolos is currently standing guard at the church, so they are definitely in danger. If I were to escape with the key, not only would my companions on the surface die, even those fellows in the underwater base would starve to death. You intend to save your companions? Stop joking. The entire city is filled with the sea folk. Even if it is you, fighting with the sea folk in the water is suicidal. A meaningless sacrifice is the shame of a knight. Suicidal? I don't think so. There was no point in saying anything more. I shook my head and walked down the hall. In a relatively spacious area, I took out my own space bag and searched for my old belongings. Yes, even if it was me, I had no chance of winning against the sea folk in the water. Furthermore, the duration of the war angel transformation was extremely short. As long as I entered the water, it would be impossible for me to shake off the sea folk's pursuit. It was impossible for me to achieve my goal. However, as long as I had that item, it wasn't impossible. Naturally, I have no chance of winning in the water. However, it might be possible on the ice. I got it. After pouring out a pile of dried plums, marbles, handmade poker cards, and other miscellaneous items, I finally found my target. It was a hand-carved short wooden sword. It was only the size of a hand, and it was obviously a child's toy sword. The workmanship was rough, and there were a few crooked words carved on the hilt of the sword. The words were distorted and childish, as though it was written by a child. Cavendish's sword. Roland is not allowed to steal it or play with it. Those words were really written by a child. That was the signature that Cavendish left for his precious wooden sword when he was still a child. When he was young, he was never willing to call me, who was only a few minutes older than him, older brother. Basically, he would just call me by my name. Caressing the marks on the sword, I felt as though I had returned to that warm and carefree childhood. In the midst of war, I saw that reckless and straightforward, foolish younger brother. I shook my head. This wasn't the time to reminisce about the past. What I needed wasn't the wooden sword itself, but the soul that was sleeping within it. Irene Bela, I need your help. Chapter 114. The Royal Colosseum was built at a high point, but the ice-cold river water still flowed into the arena unnaturally, changing the natural phenomenon of water flowing to the bottom into water flowing to the bottom. This was almost a modification of the laws of nature. Only the highest controller of the water element could do such a thing. The situation was worsening with every passing moment. I didn't have much time to waste. Irene Bela, I need your help. I need your strength. The water had already reached my feet, but I was still patiently talking to the wooden sword. Perhaps in the eyes of others, The scene was a little silly, but I knew that this was the only solution. Irene Bela wasn't the name of a person. Rather, it was a deeply wounded soul, a sleeping beauty who had been in a deep slumber for more than 300 years. My cry for help was clearly heard, but there was no response, like a stone sinking into the ocean. However, I knew that she had already woken up. It was just that she didn't want to respond to my call, or perhaps she didn't know how to respond to my call. Irene, short for Irene Bela, there isn't much time left. We have to sign a soul contract as soon as possible. Only with your help can I fight on the surface of the water. A weak voice finally sounded beside my ear. I'm already very tired. Soul creatures didn't have a natural physical body, so how could they have the concept of stamina and fatigue? However, I could understand it. The so-called love doesn't tire was probably the barrier erected by a wounded heart to prevent it from being hurt again. Yes, that's why you've been resting for more than 300 years. If you don't wake up to bask in the sun, you will probably dissipate. This wasn't a lie. For humans, excessive sadness and depression was an extremely dangerous mental illness. For soul creatures whose soul was their physical body, negative emotions were a fatal poison. Who knows? It might be a good thing for me to dissipate. You should know that I don't want to sign a contract with other night. That's why I didn't allow Renee and the others to disturb your rest. You should have other choices. Even if you haven't entered the silver rank yet, as long as you send out a contract invitation, those frigid maw wouldn't reject it. Yes, sleeping within the wooden sword was a frigid maw. It was the companion of an Aurora knight in the past, and now I was trying to poach it to become my mount. What I want isn't a chain that restrains my growth, but a pair of wings that allows me to soar higher. Only you can become my wings, and not a shackle that hinders my growth. There were many paths to the top, but to reach the top, one path was enough. The more power, the better. Too much power would lose its purity. I have already made a plan for my own growth. Ice, death, law, and holy light. The 4 main domains are enough for me to study for the rest of my life. The frigid nightmare can indeed increase my combat strength, but it isn't a necessity. Of course, becoming an Aurora Knight would greatly increase my combat strength, which was a good thing for the current me. However, the reason why I had never considered signing a contract with Frigid Maw was because Frigid Maw grew together with the Night Soul. A mature Frigid Maw would have too many traces of the original Frigid Maw, which would instead restrict my growth. As a soul creature, the newly born Frigid Maw was blank. As the contract Night grew, its master's memories and emotions would become nutrients for its growth. The master's desire to become stronger would become the driving force for its evolution. It was the most trusted mount and companion of the night. From a certain standpoint, analyzing its master's memories and emotions would often be extremely similar to its master's personality. It could be said to be the other half of a soul. Under normal circumstances, although a Frigid Maw that accepted someone else would grow quickly, it would be difficult for it to reach the peak. However, there were always exceptions to everything. The knight that Irene partnered with in the past had soul waves that were extremely similar to mine. Perhaps it could even be said to be the exact same. Irene didn't need to make any adjustments at all to be able to completely adapt to my soul. No, if it was that person's Frigid Maw, it would even be able to increase my strength. Of course, finding a new young Frigid Maw would also be able to achieve my goal. However, not mentioning the difficulty of reactivating the altar, even if I managed to obtain a Frigid Maw, I wouldn't be able to wait for it to mature. By the time Frigid Maw truly matured, I probably wouldn't need it anymore. After a period of unbearable silence, what I got in return was still Irene's bitter rejection. I'm very tired and I lack the will to fight. In my current state, I will definitely be a burden to you. To a warrior, lacking the will to fight is equivalent to death. How could I not know this? A warrior who seeks death will die sooner or later. Even though I know that Irene is able to increase my fighting prowess, I have never tried to disturb her sleep. But now, other than her, I can't think of any other way to save the people that I wish to protect in this desperate situation. Can you help me? I need your strength to save my comrades. To a person whose heart is already dead, it is difficult to reason with them. Thus, let's try to talk about feelings and talk about reality. Without your help, not only will I die, the final inheritor of the Mist bloodline will also die. Then, the contract with the Frigid Moth family will be completely severed. Good Irene, regardless of whether it is in consideration of our childhood friendship or the future of the Frigid Moth family, please help me. The spirit of a knight doesn't mean that I won't help someone when they are in danger. As expected, it's still that despicable Roland. Yes, it is despicable, but I know how to say something that the other party can't refuse. A true knight is unable to ignore someone's request for help, and that person is even more so one who can be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. As the other half of his soul and memories, Irene is also unable to ignore my request. Besides, it probably won't be long before that person returns to the mortal plane. Don't you want to ask him why he made such a choice? Why did he abandon you after making such a choice? I know, I've thought it through long ago. In his eyes, the foolish and outdated spirit of a knight isn't enough to give him the strength to take revenge. Being betrayed by a human that he trusted made him feel despair and hurt. His older brother's sacrifice made him swear to take revenge on this despairing world. Thus, he made his choice. Abandoning everything, he answered the call of the abyss and entered hell, hoping to obtain the strength to take revenge. That idiot always goes to extremes, but don't you want to ask him directly? Ask him how he's doing right now. Did he get beaten up in the chaos abyss to the point of crying? Did he often miss home? Did he regret leaving you behind? Did he abandon you because he was afraid that his depravity would corrupt you? Despicable, 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 despicable. Obviously, my last question hit Irene's weak spot. She was flustered and exasperated. The angry little girl doesn't have any technique for swearing at me. Her vocabulary is extremely poor, and she can only repeat despicable over and over again. This is probably the most vicious word in her memory. A little girl who is several hundred years old? It hasn't even been 10 years since Frigid Maw's egg hatched until it went into hibernation again. Even with all the shared memories and knowledge, she has less than 10 years of life experience. If she isn't a little girl, then what is she? However, I seem to have underestimated a little girl's resentment. Your Highness Roland, haven't you always been mocking the knight's virtues of protection and sacrifice? The spirit of mist that His Highness Cavendish believes in is even treated as a joke by you. Based on your personality, when faced with an impossible situation, shouldn't you rationally give up on those chess pieces to preserve your strength? Why did you choose the path of protection that you despise so much at this moment? Yes, Irene is Cavendish's Frigid Maw. This young soul was raised by Cavendish to have a wooden brain just like him. However, after a long hibernation, she, who is still stuck in time 300 years ago, still treats me as the young holy knight prince. Did I really think that way back then? But it really sounds like what I would say. There's no need to sigh helplessly. Since she asked such a question, I know that she is moved. Back then, I was indeed arrogant, but in the end, I still suffered a crushing defeat. Now that I'm back to square one, Cavendish is walking down my old path, so I intend to stop him. Irene Bela, come with me. I've hidden many things from you. After the contract, you can take a look at it yourself. If you're dissatisfied, you can cancel the contract. The white light that silently seeped out from the wooden sword is Irene's answer. From the moment I invited her, it was already decided. A pale, cold light surges around me. The ripples of two souls are approaching each other. The natural advantage of being a twin makes it so that Irene doesn't even need to change her wavelength to form a new contract. You must be joking. So many things actually happened back then. So many years, so many calamities. How did you survive? So much anger, despair, hatred. Why haven't you gone mad yet? Greed, nothingness, slander, jealousy, pain. You've seen all the ugliness in the world, yet you have no hope for the future. Why? Why can you still be so optimistic? Why haven't you given up hope? My soul contract is now completely open. More than 300 years and 3 complete lives of memories. That can be said to be a legendary experience, causing the innocent Irene to be astonished. Meanwhile, Her suppressed emotions and soul memories made her feel as if she had eaten the most nutritious delicacy in the world. She was growing at a furious pace. Perhaps, even if Pandora's box is opened, even if all calamities are released, there's still hope at the bottom of the box. And this time, I'm not alone. All right, don't look at me like that. I know that this sounds really artistic and Shinibu, but let's use Cavendish's words. You cheated, and I'm not convinced. Let's fight again. I don't believe that there won't be a day when I beat you up. That's what His Highness Cavendish said back then. Irene bursts into laughter. Obviously, she's thinking about how every time the two of them sparred in the past, even though Cavendish has the upper hand in terms of overall strength, this usually lazy older brother is always able to use schemes to obtain the final victory. That brat always liked to go to extremes. He won't turn back until he hits the wall, and he won't give up until he reaches the Yellow River. Yet he just happens to be talented, strong, and lucky. Most likely, he will be able to smash through the wall, and it's not like he can't cross the Yellow River either. But in the end, it always gets out of hand. This time, he really went too far. When he comes back, I'll give him a good beating and let him know the prestige of an older brother. Prestige? Do you have such a thing? In the end, he always calls you by your name, the older brother who always snatches his little brother's toys and snacks. I'm letting him know the cruelty of the outside world. I've been cultivating his competitive spirit and fighting spirit since he was young. This is the love an older brother has for his younger brother. Please call me a good older brother with boundless love, a good older brother who is cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. Keep on bragging. You're obviously jealous that the younger brother is more popular with women than the older brother. Hee. Roland, have you forgotten that after you sign a soul contract with me, I can see your past memories? Soul communication didn't require any time. As we chatted and laughed, Irene Bela quickly recovered after receiving sufficient nutrients. In just a few short seconds, her nightmare of ice began transforming into a cocoon of ice. And right now, in Desos' eyes, I only silently held the wooden sword for a few seconds before a large white cocoon appeared in front of me. I returned to my senses and lightly touched the cocoon of ice, causing it to begin shattering. Next, an illusory warhorse appeared in front of everyone. Her entire body was enveloped in an icy mist, and her eyes were like two twinkling stars. Her physical body was faintly discernible, as if she didn't exist in this dimension. Starlight shone from her physical body, and the moment she stood up, she lightly stomped on the ground, causing the water she was standing on to freeze. This was a warhorse that didn't belong to the mortal plane. Suddenly, the naughty little Irene spat out a breath of cold air at me. Yawn. Being enveloped by the cold air, I subconsciously sneezed. Before I could even react, I was already covered in a layer of snow, turning into a snowman. I shook my head helplessly. With a slight shake of my hand, snowflakes fell into the water, forming a thin layer of ice. As for me, I was covered in a layer of silver armor. The ice armor formed by the thin layer of ice wasn't thick, nor was it heavy. It looked like a fragile work of art, but in reality, it was sturdy and reliable. On Irene's body, the magic of ice started to materialize. A saddle and all sorts of weapons appeared on the horse's body. Javelins, pikes, round shields, longswords. These seemingly exquisite ice weapons were actually filled with the power of ice. Auroranite. Even if Desos and the others who knew about the situation didn't exclaim in shock, the White Wolf Guards, who were also Knight, wouldn't forget their old enemy, the legendary Super Knight group, which was said to be made up of all gold-rank fighters. Your Majesty, I appreciate your goodwill, but I still have some matters that I need to attend to. I entrust my maid, Rosemary, to you. Please bring her to a safe place. Abandoning the future spy, Rosemary, I happily tore off the annoying dress and allowed the ice armor to stick to my skin. Even though I still had a lot of things to worry about, I felt an indescribable joy and relaxation. Due to the effects of the soul contract, the ice armor was actually quite warm. Not only did it not feel as constricting or cold as the ice armor from before, I even felt like my body was lighter than before. The ice armor actually buffed and strengthened the wearer. Just as Desos was about to say something, the Snow White Knight and his war horse had already rushed to the door. On the surface of the water, traces of ice appeared. With a bitter expression, Desos shook his head. However, he could only retract his gaze helplessly. Let's begin the retreat. At this moment, I was riding on Frigid Maw, galloping at full speed. The barrier of ice was activated, and the storm was no longer able to trouble me. Can you transform into a frost dragon? You were able to do it in the past, so you should be able to do it now. Although it's too eye-catching and dangerous, it'll definitely be much faster if we fly there. If you're a legend, I'll be fine. In a sense, Frigid Maw, who had signed a soul contract, was quite similar to a mage's familiar who had signed a magic pet contract. The restriction that the servant's strength couldn't exceed the master's still existed. The beast? Time is truly a butcher's knife. In the past, Lord Roland wasn't so forgetful. Under the command of the Naga officer, the fishmen in front of her pulled out several fishing nets, seemingly intending to make an underwater version of a horse-stopping rope. However, Irene leaped lightly into the air, ignoring the fishmen's interception. Even in the past, you didn't have such a sharp tongue. Where's that big sister Snow lady who always smiles so gently? As he joked, he threw the ice javelin. The ice javelin began to spin in the air, drawing a strange arc and directly nailing the Naga mage who was casting a spell into the water. Then, the ring of ice erupted and froze several Naga guards who dared to help the mage to death. What kind of image did I have in your heart in the past? I can transform into the appearance of a snow lady, but my current strength isn't sufficient, so I'm afraid that I'll become slightly younger. But, are you sure you want to charge while riding on a snow lady? I imagined a fully armored knight riding on a young girl, shouting, "Holy light, that enemy is worth fighting," as he viciously whipped the young girl's buttocks, forcing her charge. I really want to try. No, that's too beastly. Irene, you should just maintain this appearance. I thought about how I would never be able to wash away my reputation as the king of gentlemen if others were to see my current appearance. Uncle Police, that's the person. Your Highness Roland. Have you forgotten that your memories are now connected? Also, the world you lived in was far too perverted. The opening of my soul allowed me to retain my memories from the other world. That familiar yet unfamiliar retort made me pause for a moment before bursting into laughter. Actually, you can search for the keywords Gentleman Alliance and True Love Siblings in my memories. Right? Due to the protection of minors, please do not search for Bayfoam. I take back what I said just now. As expected, there are perverts in every world. Also, you did it on purpose, right? If you didn't say it, who would have taken the initiative to search for you? If you said it, they would have definitely gone over to take a look out of curiosity. I nearly went blind. You have to take responsibility. I'll be responsible for introducing Bayfoam to you. I apologize. Please don't take responsibility for me. Even though she was joking, the galloping Aurora warhorse didn't slow down at all. Her natural talent of turning water into ice allowed her to easily jump and avoid the encirclement of the sea folk. Even a fastest seahorse knight was unable to keep up with her pace. Furthermore, with the advantage of my new idea, I didn't have to worry about being knocked off my horse. I only had to choose to attack and kill my target. If I were to meet with a strong offensive magic, the semi-god equipment scepter's protective magic would be perfect for an emergency. Protection of the Dark God summons a formless protective shield that absorbs 200 points of magic damage or magic weapon damage. Before the protective shield shatters, the wearer will be immune to stun, transformation, and other control-type magic. Lasts for 10 seconds. Used 3 times a day. After using the final protective shield to block a chain of ice arrows from a Naga mage, we had already reached the border of the Pearl District before the enemy's aerial troops arrived. Let's head to the Church of Law first and meet up with everyone. Please be safe.